Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how do you take that sack if you're Kyler Murray? They sent 3 and you had 5.
He's a second-year player. That's the only answer I have. You didn't feel the pressure coming from the backside from behind him. I don't know. I'm kind of surprised he didn't get rid of the ball either. But fourth down, I don't know. He was able to avoid the sack the previous week, right? He must have just thought he had some magic.
Is it just because he didn't see it coming?
I think it's just because he didn't see it coming. His offensive line, there's 5. They're protecting against 30. He must have just expected them to be able to handle what. And it's not like Carlos Dunlap is the star that he once was, right? It's like two guys should be able to handle. This is not like 2015 Von Miller. Like 2 of you should be able to handle this guy.
Yeah, this is not peak form by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that I was expecting some amazing, magic in the end zone or anything. I was, however, expecting him to find a way to scramble for 10 yards if they sent 3 and the safeties were way out in the middle of nowhere. It was there. Yeah. It just seemed likely. And then he got sacked, and I just remember sitting there like, all right, I guess I'm turning the TV off. We waited to record for that, huh? Great. Okay, well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Want to thank you guys so much for listening. We have a preview this episode for the Cowboys game happening this weekend with someone for the Dallas Morning News. So I hope you guys stick around for that. Also, we have a massive mailbag, and there have been people in the past. I know it's hard to believe this. There are people in the past who have complained about the large amount of content that we have that is revolving around cooking and Thanksgiving, or that all the Vikings podcasts seem to talk just the entire time about food for most of their episodes. So I want to warn you, there is a lot of Thanksgiving talk near the end of the episode. So I will tell you when we start to go into the food stuff. So just letting you know, this is an episode. It may look really long, but there are a fair amount of Thanksgiving things that you may or may not be interested in near the end of the show. We hear from people. In fact, we heard from people on Monday night that's like the reason why they listen is like the last half of the mailbag. So if you are one of those people, congratulations, you're in for a doozy of a mailbag. So again, just want to thank you guys so much for listening. We would not be where we are without you guys who listen, who send out links about Norse Code, who interact with us on social media, who tell their friends about this, their coworkers, whatever. Again, thank you so much. Want to thank two special people in particular. Want to thank Daniel Cabeza and Corey Mondale for joining us over on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. The bonus episode for this week will be available there, and I want to tell you that it is one of the best ideas, or rather, it's one of the worst ideas we've ever had that I've ever really wanted to do, and involves a wonderful impromptu graduation speech by Arif Hassan. So if you are interested in bonus material, this is something I cannot stress enough. This is pure gold. So if you are interested in more Arif and James, what you can do is you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and listen to Arif's James Madison University graduation speech. Or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well and donate to it there. For Patreon rather, we are suggesting a $3.50 donation per month, which does in fact keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay and gives you access to both the bonus episodes that we put out just about every week, and a couple days ago we did a Zoom watch along for the Monday night game, which we will do something similar later in the season. So again, if you're interested in such things, you can do that there. Also, we have over at Threadless, we have our store. We have merch. If you are interested in such silliness, you can go to norsecode.threadless.com. Go over to the collections, and there's a whole list of things that we have available. You can get our fantastic logo, featuring Arif and his hatred of turkey. You can get the picture. It really is fantastic. It's on a number of different things. This isn't a money making venture necessarily. We're not making much on each purchase. But if you would like to support the show, you can also do it there as well. There's cell phone cases. There's baby onesies, which are still being delivered, I believe at this point, because I think that one went overseas. But yeah, if you're interested in these things,
so the shirts are produced domestically, but the onesies, we gotta
no.
have some.
The onesie was being
the
shipped
onesie is going overseas. Oh, yes. Wow. Yep. Okay.
Those we have
Europeans. That makes even less sense than normally buying the onesie.
There are Europeans who are interested in the Norse Code merch and have
in adorning their child in Norse Code related memorabilia.
In their defense, Nessie is pretty cute in the picture, so it
that's true. And if anyone asks, they can just be like, "Oh, it's an American cartoon." They don't have to go into any detail.
So why are the two of them so angry? It would be my question when looking at the picture, but. Hey, that's their thing. So again, if you're interested in the merch that we have available, it's over at norsecode.threadless.com, and just click on the collections button, and that will bring you over to the store. This will be the last episode I remind people about this. If you are a member of our Patreon and you would like free swag, I will be sending that out for the holidays. I'll be probably sending that out here the first week of December. So if you are interested in such things, if you are subscribed to the Patreon, just message me. There are a number of those who have already messaged me, and I said I would contact you closer to December. Well, I'm going to start doing that now. So if you have already messaged me, I will message you back. If you have not had the chance, now is your time to do so, and I will confirm addresses and all that so I can send stuff out. I do want to know if somebody wants a rather large object that they would like hanging in their room, their office. Don has a hot tub building on his lawn area. Perhaps this would be good for you, Don. So in any case, if anyone wants the large object that we have to send out this year, please make mention of that, and I will raffle that off.
You're gonna need some room to hang this on your wall.
You are gonna need a little bit of room. It is rather large, and I am looking at it right now from across the room, and it looks ready to go. It looks like it needs to no longer be in my bedroom and needs to be hanging in someone else's. So if you are interested in the largest object that we can send out this year, let me know. I'll find a way. But please don't throw it. Just find a way to hang it up, even if it is done in a way that's passive aggressive to your spouse. Just throwing that out there because there is another passive-aggressive question. So all of these things aside, once again, thank you so much for listening to Norse Code. Right now, what we are going to do is go to a Cowboys preview that Arif taped earlier today with John Owning of the Dallas Morning News.
I'm here with John Owning, a Dallas Morning News blogger and a defensive line specialist. I usually go to him when I've got some questions about defensive linemen I need to ask. Did me wrong in Ngakoue, but I think we're otherwise pretty cool. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. Just it's a lovely sunny afternoon after a couple of rainy days over here in California, so can't complain.
All right. Cool. Yeah, so real quick, we're just talking about the Cowboys. This roster.
It was once good, now it's not so much.
It always feels like the Cowboys are about to set the world on fire. Then the season starts.
Yeah. Just once you get on the field, that's a big wet blanket, But we look great on a hoof. On paper, we're paper champions for like 10 years straight.
Yeah, man. You entered the season Madden's third-ranked team or something crazy like that.
I think that's mostly because the player rater's a Cowboys fan, but
that might help. Let's talk about the roster real quick. Well, one big reason, obviously, is that Dak Prescott's not available. They've had to play Ben DiNucci, Garrett Gilbert, both huge talents that I love dearly. Well, I mean, James Madison alum and AAF MVP Garrett Gilbert can't knock that. I don't even know why they made Cooper Rush active the weeks they did. but the Cowboys are going to roll with Andy Dalton despite how well Garrett Gilbert played. How do you feel about Andy Dalton? Because when he was signed, everyone was like, "Wow, this is the greatest backup quarterback you could have possibly obtained." And now the Cowboys have him, and now they need him, and then he didn't play that well.
I think under optimal circumstances, Andy Dalton would have been a fine backup quarterback for the Cowboys. But since Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins were lost for the year, and that kind of really hindered the Cowboys' ability to pass protect on a consistent basis, that he lacks the mobility. He kind of short circuits anytime he gets pressured, and that's really deteriorated his ability to really be effective in the games that he's played for the Cowboys this season. That's why I kind of like Garrett Gilbert more than Dalton, because he can move a little bit. He has a bigger arm. He can stretch the field a little bit better. And also he's someone to evaluate for a cheaper backup quarterback potentially next year. Andy Dalton's making like $3.5 million. If you can save a little bit of money by having Gilbert be the backup quarterback, especially for the Cowboys, who are going to be cap space strapped next year once they sign Dak Prescott to $40+ million per year or whatever it's going to be. So the whole quarterback situation is just icky right now. That's all.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Yeah. What happened to Andy Dalton's mobility? Because I know coming out of TCU, he could move a little bit. Is it just like he doesn't know when to move? Has he gotten a lot slower? It's not like he's, Alex Smith and he's going to surprise you when he goes for a 20-yard run or anything like that. But, he had a fair amount of mobility coming out of TCU, and then he only used it a little bit in Cincinnati. And it just feels like he doesn't really have it.
I feel like it's not that obviously he's a little less athletic than he was coming out, but I think it's more of a mental thing, he gets frenetic when he gets pressured. He doesn't really know where to go. He's kind of like dodging, and he gets his eyes on the rush. He doesn't keep his eyes downfield. And he just, like I said, he just gets kind of frenetic, and that really deteriorates his quarterbacking ability a lot. His base will get wide. His mechanics really deteriorate. So he's just for some reason, when bodies get around him, I don't know if he has PTSD from his Cincinnati days, but it's just not good anytime he's pressured. And when you're playing guys like Terrence Steele and Cameron Irving at tackle, that you're going to get pressured pretty often.
Yeah, so that matchup I think is going to be pretty interesting. What does Andy Dalton do though when he does have, a reasonable pocket? Is he so this is kind of like the David Carr worry when he was in Houston, when even when he had clean pockets, he was so scared of not having a clean pocket that he would fire a little bit too quickly. Is that a concern for Dalton, or when things, or when you've got smooth sailing, is he still an effective quarterback?
He's effective into the short and intermediate places, but he still is afraid to stretch the ball deep a lot because, like you said with the David Carr thing, I think he's scared that the pressure's coming. He thinks the pressure's coming no matter what every play, so he's always trying to get the ball out as quickly as he can. So you'll see him kind of go through his progressions really, really quickly, or hit the first short to intermediate option that he has. So it's really hard for the Cowboys to sustain long drives just relying on his short to intermediate passing ability, especially when the Cowboys running game has been really below average this year.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of this is contingent upon, how poorly that offensive line has been performing. So it sounds like Biadasz is not going to be available for the game, if I'm reading that correctly. So it's just Zach Martin, Cameron Irving, Connor Williams, probably Terrence Steele, and Brandon Knight might come back. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it sounds like Brandon Knight might be a possibility next week. I don't think he's going to be back this week. It's going to be Steele, I believe, at right tackle.
Okay. And
unfortunately for us.
Right. Well, so this is the interesting thing. So the Vikings defensive line, composed of a lot of players that not a lot of people have heard of. You do a ton of defensive line work, so you're pretty familiar with these guys. But for the most part, they performed really well against Chicago. But Chicago had a completely backup offensive line. That doesn't, like, that level of competition concern doesn't seem to be an issue because they'll be going up against, except for Zach Martin and to some extent Connor Williams, a completely backup offensive line. So when you take a look at players like DJ Wanham, Hercules Mataafa, who's now playing along the edge, Ifeadi Adenabo, and then, the tackles, Shamar Stephen, Jaleel Johnson, Armin Watts. You take a look at those guys and you look at the matchup that they have. I don't know. What are you thinking? Because this just feels like a movable object and a resistible force. Who's going to lose?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the Cowboys are going to. The fact that the Cowboys still have Zach Martin is a really huge thing because he does so many things well for them. He is such a big help to the guys next to him that Cowboys can still manage some success because of Zach Martin's just being there, his presence on the offensive line. But the things I worry about are mostly in the run game. I actually think that Irving and Steele can hold up adequately in pass protection against the Ifeadi Odenigbos and Jalen Holmes. I heard you say his name. I was like, I hope he says his name first because I say it very poorly. I just call him Ifeadi in my head.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Yeah.
But in the run game is where I think it's going to be a really big issue. I think that's where Terrence Steele and Cameron Irving have had even bigger issues than in pass protection. They have really struggled to make their reach blocks in the zone game. They really struggle climbing to the second level and hitting their targets. That they struggle there, and I think guys like Jalen Holmes can have a really big game there. I think Hercules Mataafa's initial quickness is going to give guys like Steele and Irving a lot of issues on those zone schemes that the Cowboys really like to play. So I would say Minnesota's defensive line has the advantage against the run, but against the pass, I think the Cowboys offensive line can hold up better than they usually do. So adequately. I'm not going to say they're going to goose egg the Minnesota defensive line because I don't think the Cowboys offensive line is good enough to do that to any NFL defensive line, but I think they'll perform better than they have recently.
Okay. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that run game. So a lot of money invested in Ezekiel Elliott. Not a ton of production this year out of him. It seems like when Tony Pollard's on the field, Pollard has been a little bit more efficient. I don't know if that's a situational thing, or if it's just random variance, or what is it. But can Ezekiel Elliott's struggles be entirely explained, by the offensive line, or is there stuff there that he's not playing as well as he did before, or what's the deal with the ineffectiveness of the running game? Is it entirely the offensive line?
Yeah, I actually wrote about this at the Dallas Morning News last week when I was talking about Ezekiel Elliott being one of the bigger disappointments for the Cowboys roster this year. The fact you can explain a lot of the rushing game's lack of success due to the offensive line, but Ezekiel Elliott still isn't performing well in areas where he has the most control. He still leads all running backs. I believe last time I checked, he leads them in fumbles, he leads them in drops, and he leads them in pressures allowed in pass protection. So he just hasn't been doing as well in areas that he succeeded in the past. And even when he gets one area where he's really struggled this year is he's not been as successful as he had previously. And when he gets one-on-one matchups with defensive backs on the edge, when he does get the proper blocking on, say, a duo and he bounces outside, he hasn't been making that guy miss. He's averaging the least amount of yards after contact than he has per carry in his entire career. So I definitely think there's been a deterioration in his play. And just the fact that Pollard has more explosiveness, he has more juice in his legs to be able to hit the hole and get to the second level a little bit quicker and threaten those pursuit angles a little bit better. That's allowed him to be a little bit more of an explosive threat for the Cowboys offense.
So if that's the case, why hasn't Pollard been getting a little bit more run then?
90 million reasons why? Ezekiel is paid so much. He's like, Bob Stern did a great piece on this at the Athletic. I think it was this week or last week about Ezekiel Elliott and how he's just so one-to-one with the Cowboys franchise. He's in all the marketing things. He's kind of personifies what the Cowboys want in their players outside of the whole fiasco we had with the NFL. I mean, Jerry Jones loves him. Garrett before him loved him. McCarthy loves him. He's just kind of what they want in a football player. I mean, he's the guy who talks to the media every week. He takes the lumps. He doesn't make excuses, all those type of things. So I just think that because he's kind of the leader of the team, that they don't want to reduce his role and kind of inhibit his ability to lead would be my guess. And obviously the financial factors as well. Because when you look at it, Pollard is more explosive and he is more effective on a play-by-play basis just because of his athletic ability. Now, Pollard still has issues with his vision. He'll miss some interior run reads, but when you get him on the perimeter, there's no denying that he's much more effective and much more consistent than Ezekiel Elliott has been this year.
Well, so one area that, typically you would go to also is like pass protection, and not necessarily being better at it, but kind of knowing the pass protection assignment. And I remember Ezekiel coming out of college was one of the best pass protecting premier backs that I had seen at Ohio State, and he's given a lot of pass protection snaps with Dallas. But also he's like not good at it. Why not? Like, what happened?
He's good. He's very inconsistent because he'll have games where he's really effective. I remember the Seattle game was one where he had one of his best games in pass protection that I remember of his career. He was doing a fantastic job picking up free rushers, scanning protection, going from one side to the other, picking up, helping chip, all those type of things. But the thing, he seems to have just lapses in judgment, like times where he doesn't expect to rush to get there as quickly as it does, and he kind of gets surprised, and that creates knockback that creates the separation for the rusher to be able to pressure the QB, whether get a sack, a hit, alter the throw, all those type of things. He kind of just has weird lapses of judgment, which is just kind of odd when you compare it to the rest of his game, because there's a lot of times he'll do it correctly. He just has those inconsistency bouts where, like I said, it just looks like he just doesn't really. He looks surprised more than anything that a free rusher is coming when he's not having success. So I don't know if it's a concentration issue. I don't know if it's a studying issue. They say he's one of the hardest studiers on the team and he works as hard as anybody. So I don't want to say it's that, but there's just those lapses in judgment that happen a couple times that it seems like every game or a game or two.
Okay, well, that's going to be pretty important. The Vikings tend to blitz backup quarterbacks a little bit more, it seems like. They blitzed a lot last week. They blitzed a lot in week one. It kind of depends on their evaluation of Andy Dalton as a quarterback that seems to drive their blitzing decisions. But I imagine that Ezekiel Elliott's capabilities in pass protection will end up becoming pretty important. But let's talk about the cream of the crop here, this really remarkable skill group. CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Amari Cooper. I've always been a fan of Cedric Wilson ever since I saw him at the Senior Bowl. And it was Noah Brown, I think, from Ohio State. It's not a bad, fifth or sixth guy to have. So, and I think they also, did they grab a Green Bay deep threat too?
Seattle, Malik Turner.
Okay,
he was on Green Bay before he came to the Cowboys, but he played most of his career with the Seattle Seahawks.
Okay, yeah, I remember he was active against the Vikings, for once against Green Bay. So, let's talk about this group here. So it seems like CeeDee Lamb primarily lines up in the slot, and Cooper and Gallup are on the outside. But my sense is that they could do anything they want with any of these three and play them at any position. So why is it that it's primarily Lamb in the slot and those two on the outside?
I just don't think because Lamb's a rookie and it was a shortened offseason that they want to make it as simplistic as possible for him. So just let him stay in one and really hone one spot primarily in the slot. He's been really effective there, and I don't think they've seen a reason to really expand his role yet when you have guys like Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup on the outside who you don't really want to limit their opportunities, and they still want to provide opportunities for Cedric Wilson and Noah Brown every game. So I don't think it's real. I think it's something that's going to expand for CeeDee Lamb in his second and third years, but I think they're just trying to make it as simple as possible. That's been kind of a theme that Mike McCarthy has really reiterated throughout this season, is they're trying to make it as simplistic as possible because they had limited prep time this year.
So when you take a look at the way the Vikings defense is set up, so obviously the matchup matters. They'll be going against, well, actually, I have no idea who they'll be going up against, but my guess is Jeff Gladney. Maybe Cameron Dancer will be healthy. Maybe Chris Boyd will be healthy. I don't know, but if not, it's going to be Chris Jones, but not the Chris Jones from Kansas City or the Chris Jones from the punter. Where's that punter at?
That's our punter.
Yeah,
that's our guy. He's hurt right now though.
Yeah, I was looking through this roster. I was like, wait, I thought he was a Cowboys punter, and then I'm seeing someone named Hunter Nicewander.
The dual-footed man.
Oh wow, okay, we'll talk about that.
That's a fun fact for your listeners.
He has 2 feet. No, but when you take a look at this matchup, where you've got a surprisingly effective cornerback group that's mostly hidden by the fact that they're playing a ton of cover 2. You've got 2 high safeties, probably the 2 best safeties in the league. How is it, do you think the Cowboys will attack that kind of setup? It's not like cover 2 is foreign to the league or anything like that.
I think what I'm thinking is it's going to be a big CeeDee Lamb day as long as the pass protection holds up like I think it will. I think they're going to be trying to hit CeeDee Lamb on a lot of over routes, a lot of those, depending on what type of too high they're playing, whether it's quarters, Tampa 2 or cover 2. I think they're going to be trying to sneak Lamb on those deep over routes off play action behind those intermediate defenders. That's something that they've been really successful with a lot this season. And it's something that they try to hit a couple plays every week. And another thing I think you'll see them try to do is they'll try to match up CeeDee Lamb against whoever that deep middle defender is going to be, who's ever running the pull. I'm guessing it's going to be Eric Kendricks. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to see the Cowboys try to really take advantage of that matchup. We'll see how good it goes because Kendrick is one of the best coverage linebackers in the league. You know that, obviously. So it's going to be interesting, but it all goes back to the quarterback play, and I just don't really trust Andy Dalton to be able to take advantage of anything. That's been kind of the theme of the entire week. Like, since Dak Prescott has gone down, the production of the receivers has gone down with it. It's really deteriorated since.
Imagine that.
Yeah, it's really gone down. But if whoever follows me on Twitter, they're still putting up, like, they're still running great routes. They're still putting DBs on posters, are still creating a lot of separation. It's just that the quarterbacks have not been able to take advantage, and I just don't trust that Andy Dalton is going to be able to take advantage this week.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so of all those matchups then, so it sounds like you like CeeDee Lamb versus whoever the nickel is going to be more than
do you think Gladney is going to play in the slot? Because that's interesting because they matched up a lot in the Oklahoma TCU matchup last year, and Gladney had a lot of success when CeeDee Lamb was aligned on the outside, but when Gladney would kind of follow him into the slot or into that number 2 in a 3-wide situation, he would struggle when forced to give CeeDee Lamb a 2-way go. So I'd be really interested to see how those two match up when Lamb's playing in the slot and Gladney has to give him a 2-way go each time. I think that would be interesting to see how
I think that they'll probably lean on that experience, and I wouldn't be shocked if they decided that Gladney should be outside in 2 and slot in 3. Mm-hmm. That's my guess. They've been playing Gladney in the slot a lot. Chris Jones, I'm guessing, is going to be an outside guy, but I don't know. I mean, like, things can change just because of the way that this secondary has been just moving through DBs as injuries have piled up. Mm-hmm. Things can change, but yeah. I'm guessing it's going to be Gladney in the slot. I've seen Chris Jones in the slot. So if I were the Vikings, I'd probably lean on that experience, and I wouldn't be shocked if they did that too. So if that's the matchup you like, that means you're foregoing potentially Amari Cooper versus Chris Jones is the other reason, right? If you're like, I liked how CeeDee Lamb played Jeff Gladney in the slot, when they were in college. I don't know, man. I like how Amari Cooper matches up with Chris Jones, who I learned about 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. It's a great point.
So that's kind of interesting to me. Is just because, like, those receivers are so good. The Vikings cornerback group has been rapidly improving, but when you start with that qualifier that tells you that doesn't mean that they're good, right? It just means that they've been bad and they're not as bad as they were before. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's fascinating to me.
That reminds me of the Cowboys defensive line.
No, I was on a Cowboys podcast the other day, and they were like, "Oh yeah, the defensive line is improving." And I was like, "Oh, it's that kind of day, huh?" But yeah, and you're talking about these deep overs, and the Vikings used to destroy over routes, but that was back when they ran a bunch of quarters coverage, right? Mm-hmm. When Anthony Harris can just nail the over and he got like 3 picks off of overs. Mm-hmm. So like maybe they see that and they decide this is the game they go cover 4, and then. Well, now you've got Amari Cooper lined up Chris Jones without any help at all. Mm-hmm. So, like, I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Again, Andy Dalton, right? But,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why I was thinking kind of they would put Gladney there because you would think, like, take away the closest threat. Because Andy Dalton, like, the farther you get away from him, the less effective he tends to be. So maybe they're thinking, like, let's try to have the best middle of the defense coverage that we can, and we'll just take our chances that he's not going to be able to beat us outside.
That might be it. I mean, Zimmer's pretty aggressive when he finds a quarterback weakness. He's like really aggressive about exploiting it. So I would not be shocked if that, especially if they're going to kind of tighten up the throwing window by blitzing a little bit more often. Because like honestly, like Troy Dye is only good at blitzing right now. So if he's on the field, you might as well. But yeah, well, we did miss one position. Andy Dalton seems to like Dalton Schultz. We can ignore like
my man.
But
Schultz
yeah,
folks, hashtag.
Okay, well, tell me what makes Dalton Schultz so good, and tell me why Blake Bell's not going to have a revenge game against the Vikings. The Belldozer.
Well, Schultz, the thing that I liked about him initially was just his blocking ability. He was, for the last couple of years, I think he's been the best blocking tight end that the Cowboys have had. And then this year, since Blake Jarwin went down with an injury, he's been able to show his ability as a receiver. He's not super athletic, but he does a really good job finding space in between zones. He snaps out of his routes on curls and stops really well. He finds most of his production coming off play action, where he's kind of the slide, where he sneaks his way out after thinking like he's blocking and gets those time. And then he gets a lot of stop route production. So those are his two primary things. And he does well with them. He's not somebody who really stretches the seam vertically really well, but I just think for the things that he does them pretty well. And it allows the Cowboys to have some effectiveness from the tight end position, because everybody thought it was going to be a disaster once Blake Jarwin went down with an injury. And then you have guys like Dalton and Gilbert who are most comfortable, hitting those quick passes underneath. And that's why Schultz has been getting a lot of play the last few weeks. Okay.
So no Blake Bell revenge game?
I don't think so. The Belldozer is only really used as a blocker. So, and on special teams, he's put a couple special teamers into the ground this year. So maybe your special teamers might have to worry about getting put on a poster, but besides that, I don't think you have to worry about Belldozer running wild or anything.
Fair enough. Well, let's switch tracks and talk about something equally as optimistic: the defense. Sorry, man. This team was supposed to be so good. I just can't.
It was, man. Don't read my tweets before the season. Don't, please.
well, okay. So the defensive line, they took a ton of shots at defensive linemen in free agency. One of them kind of seems to have worked out with Aldon Smith, although he's kind of tapered off a little bit. So you've got kind of a duo between him and Randy Gregory. DeMarcus Lawrence is playing pretty well. I don't think he's got the volume stats, but I think he's playing pretty well. And the rest of the defensive line is improving.
Man, the Cowboys have the worst collection of defensive tackles in the league, and I
don't know. The Vikings could maybe challenge you for that one. I don't know.
Do you know what I would do for a Shamar Stephen right now, bro? Do you know what I would do? I would do some disgusting things to get him on my team right now. So
the Vikings were pretty big on Neville Gallimore in the draft. I don't know, man.
Yeah. Hey, I'll trade you.
Well, okay. Well, tell me a little bit about Antoine Woods. Tell me a little bit about Neville Gallimore. Tell me a little bit about Justin Hamilton and Eli Ngakoue.
Man, you could tell me as much about Eli Ngakoue as I could tell you. He played like 8 snaps and was not good. Not good. But Neville Gallimore, he actually played pretty well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was his first decent performance of the season. He would been kind of a disaster before that game. The thing he does well is he has a lot of vertical explosiveness. So whenever he gets in positions where he can shoot gaps, where the Cowboys run some of their slants, where he can really attack on a diagonal line and get upfield, he's effective. And that's where they did against Pittsburgh. And I think he had like 3 stops at or behind the line of scrimmage against them. So it was pretty effective. But he struggles anytime he's forced to take on double teams. He doesn't do a really good job on defending reach blocks. He gets reached a lot because he lacks the lateral quickness and lateral mobility that you would really like from a defensive tackle. I think Antoine Woods has actually been the best defensive tackle the Cowboys have had. He plays the hardest. He does the best job taking on double teams. Not a great job, mind you, just a decent job. The thing he actually does really good. He actually sniffs out screens really well as a nose tackle, which is the weirdest skill set I've ever seen for a nose tackle. But he does it pretty well. So that's one thing he does. The thing that none of the defensive tackles on the Cowboys roster can do. None of them can rush the passer. They're all terrible pass rushers. Justin Hamilton, he's a strong, powerful guy, but anytime you get him to move laterally, he gets worse and worse and worse with each step he's forced to take. So those guys really, really, really struggle.
It's really set up against the zone then, huh?
Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm really worried about the Vikings zone running game, their ability on those outside stretch plays, outside zone, mid zone, those type of things. I think they're going to be able to really take advantage if they can get the reach on these Cowboys defensive tackles, which the Cowboys defensive tackles have been getting reached all season. So why wouldn't they get reached against Minnesota?
Yeah, well, especially against like Garrett Bradbury.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty rough. Yeah, well, we could talk about these edge defenders. Sounds like you wanted to talk a little bit more about them.
I could talk about DeMarcus Lawrence. I get happy talking about him because he's the only one playing worth his salt. He's sorry, I'm so pessimistic on this podcast. I'm sorry, I feel bad.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think the listeners will love it.
This is what happens when you're forced to cover a 2-7 team, I guess, that you expected to be like a Super Bowl contender coming into the season.
Hey, Vikings were 1-5 not too long ago, man. I get it.
But seriously, DeMarcus Lawrence is probably one of the 2 or 3 best run defending defensive ends there are in the league. He's really good job as a backside chase defender on zone. That's really the Cowboys' best opportunity to defend zone is really like DeMarcus Lawrence, please save us, is basically what they resort to a lot of the times. He does the Watt thing where he'll swim into the B gap to get vertical and take outside zone. He kind of takes gambles like that. They can get the Cowboys in bad positions every once in a while, but he doesn't do it that often that it's really a big deal. He's a good chase defender. He sets a strong edge. He's really effective there as a pass rusher. He's still, I think, really effective. I think PFF has him as one of the highest win rates among edge rushers this year. So he's just gets double teamed. He gets chipped a lot. Aldon Smith on the other edge, he started the season off really strong. Literally, his strength, his length was really a lot for tight ends. But as teams have adjusted the teams have been doing a really good job of lining tight ends up pre-snap on Aldon Smith's side because the Cowboys like to line Aldon Smith against tight ends so that he can really use his length and strength to create a mismatch there. But teams have been motioning their tight ends away and going to DeMarcus Lawrence's side. So it's been putting Aldon Smith as the open side edge defender, matching him up more often against offensive tackles. And he's been struggling a little bit more in the run defense since that's happened. As a pass rusher, he kind of plods in his movement. If he doesn't win with his hands immediately, he doesn't really have the speed or the quickness to really win with his counters. He wins with power a lot. Those are some things he does well, but the effectiveness since he had a knee injury, I think it was 3 weeks ago, has been waning in that area as well. He's kind of been an average edge defender since he had that knee injury. The guy I'm really excited about is Randy Gregory. He came off a really strong game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had like 5 pressures, 3 stops, something like that. For a guy who wins with speed, he's actually been much more effective with speed to power and inside counter moves, which is interesting. I think he's done a really good job of using his speed as kind of a decoy to get offensive tackles to overset. He had got Alejandro Villanueva to overset 3 or 4 times a couple weeks ago, and he countered with some beautiful inside swim moves that allowed him to create some pressure and get some hits on Ben Roethlisberger. So he's somebody I'm really interested in. I would really love to see the Cowboys give Bradley and Nye some more run, but they have decided that they would really like to see more from Dorrance Armstrong, who's a little bit longer, more of a traditional defensive end, probably a little bit more consistent against the run, but he doesn't bring much as a pass rusher.
So you're saying that neither of my James Madison Dukes, Rondell Carter or Ben DiNucci, neither of them are going to see the field, huh?
I think I don't know about Rondell Carter because they just claimed him off waivers from the Indianapolis Colts this week. So I don't know if they're going to give him run this week, but he's somebody who I am excited to see get some play because I heard a lot of good things about him during training camp. And I know when the Cowboys put him on their practice squad, they were really upset that he got poached by the Colts.
Yeah, I think he doesn't have a number assigned yet, even though he'd already been on the team.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't even know if he's gotten through the COVID protocols yet to be able to even join the team.
Yeah, I never know how that works when they're already.
Everything's all confusing. It's messing with me this year.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, Rondell Carter pops off next week. Then how about that?
Yeah. I'm excited, man. He had his numbers and his teammate, who's on the Baltimore Ravens. I'm forgetting his name right now, but they had some of the most absurd production off the edge. I think they combined for over 120 pressures, over 23 sacks combined last year. They were just insane production, obviously against lesser competition. But I just remember looking at that when they drafted Rondell Carter, geez Louise, did teams ever get a pass off against these guys? This is insane.
Well, I mean, they made a couple of national championships for a reason, man.
Yeah, exactly. And it was all because of DiNucci, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, DiNucci, he was driving the bus there.
Yeah.
Not to be a downer, but it's time to talk about linebackers. Um, so you've got Jalen Smith, who recently coaches were quoted as saying does his job. You've got Leighton Vander Esch, who had a great rookie year.
Yep.
And then Sean Lee when he shows up and is available. And then Joe Thomas, but not that Joe Thomas.
Yeah, not the special teams version, the linebacker
special teams version Joe Thomas,
But
Thomas whose dad was playing at South Carolina not too long ago.
Man, Jalen Smith is one of the most interesting things because he's like this weird dichotomy of he's played objectively poorly this season, but
he had like one good game, like a phenomenal game.
Yeah,
like
against
the
Giants.
Ago.
Against the Giants. He played out of his mind against Barrett because he'd seen the offense for 5 years before then. But he's played objectively bad, but he still gets, I think, too much blame from the Cowboys fan base for the defensive woes. Like anytime something bad happens on defense, every single fan's like, "Oh, look at Jalen Smith, didn't make the play, didn't do it, It's all his fault. I don't care if he's playing the flat. Why isn't he playing deep? Why isn't he helping Trayvon Diggs deep, man? Should have got home on the pressure. That's what it was. Should have got home. You know, they always blame him, but he's obvious. There's things he has issues. I think for him, there's two big things that he's been battling this year. One is run fits from too high. He was trained in a system with Marinelli where the Cowboys were always among the leaders playing single high defense, and one high run fits are a lot easier mentally on the linebackers because they're gapped out. They have a man for every gap. And when you're playing these too high run fits that no one likes to play so often, linebackers are responsible for multiple gaps, so they have to play more laterally, and that just does not play to Jalen Smith's strengths, and that's caused him to really have a lot of big issues with his runs fits in those situations. And then it also hurts that he has to play off blocks a little bit more because the Cowboys defensive tackles are so terrible. And he just doesn't play off blocks very well. So he's just really struggled in those two areas against the run. And then as a coverage guy, I think he's done better than most give him credit for. He just has a really big issue when he's isolated in man coverage against tight ends. That's really the only area that I think he struggles. He does a good job matching receivers to the flats. He plays the zones moderately well. He just really has an issue when he has to cut, when he gets isolated in man coverage. And then Leighton Vander Esch, someone who's been dealing with a lot of injuries this year since he's come back. I think it's been just issues him getting comfortable playing in the scheme again. He's another one. His run fits, he reacts way too much to the eye candy and motion. He kind of gets moved out of his run fits way too easily by jet motion and the like. So he's been having issues there. And then coverage, it's really been a big issue for him. If he's not doing a robot on play action, he's probably not doing his job correctly in coverage as of right now. And then Sean Lee, I mean, he's a leader. He's helping him, I guess. Get him aligned. He's getting them aligned, I guess. But he's only been back for like a week or two, and he hasn't really made much of an impact when he's been in the game, in my opinion.
He's a leader. man. Okay, cool. That's so why is it that there's like 9 linebackers listed on this roster?
I'm wondering the same thing. Like, why is Luke Gifford on this team? Like, Luke Gifford's been inactive. He's been on the 53-man roster for so long. They even bumped up Francis Bernard, but for some reason kept Luke Gifford on the 53-man roster, even though he's never been active, and you would have no issue putting him to the practice squad. I don't get it. I was just talking to my editor at the Dallas Morning News about this. Actually, it's befuddling how the Cowboys in an NFL where linebackers are playing less and less, teams are playing only 2 linebackers, even 1 linebacker on the field more and more and more. But the Cowboys have like 7 on their roster for some reason. I don't get it.
All right. Well, we could talk about where maybe they should have invested that roster space in those defensive backs. Trayvon Diggs not going to be available for the game because he's on IR. Is that a 3-week IR, do you think? Or what's the deal?
It's 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks he's going to be out.
So he'll be back in time for an improbable playoff run.
No, please don't. That would be the worst. That would be the worst, which is possible. And the thing is, there's like a 30% chance it might happen.
Yeah, they've got a shot, man. They've got a shot.
I'm dreading it.
Dude, by rule, someone has to win the NFC East. That's just the rules, man.
Oh,
And this is the year they expanded the playoff too.
If I have to cover a Cowboys playoff game where they went 4-12, I don't know if I can make it, man. I don't know if I can do it.
I think someone said the most probable playoff win chances is a 5-10-1 team, which would likely be the Eagles then. 5-10-1 playoff team, man.
Is that the worst record of a playoff team ever? That has to be, right?
Yeah, because the worst previous record was 7-9, and I think that's
by 2 games. That's how good we are. We just set the bar, just jump the bar a couple levels for you.
Well, the 7-9 Seahawks team beat the Saints in that game, so who knows? Anything is possible.
I don't need people telling me like, see, the Saints, man, and the Seahawks, the beast. Was that the Beastquake game?
That was Beastquake. Beastquake. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we don't got a Beastquake. There's no Zequake coming. Sorry.
Zequake. Good Lord. All right, let's talk about Anthony Brown. Let's talk about the return of the Cheeto. Let's talk about Jordan Lewis. What do we got at these cornerback positions, man?
I'm actually excited about the Chidobe Awuzie return. I think even when they're all healthy, I think he's the best cornerback they have. He limits separation the best. He just has an issue at the catch point. He just happens to have that one little
kind of important,
one little issue when the ball is thrown into his vicinity. He doesn't typically touch it, which is a problem. But he dissuades quarterbacks from throwing in his direction pretty well because he gives tight coverage really well. He's really good in off coverage, driving from top down on throws. His press technique gets a little bit wonky sometimes, so you'll see the Cowboys play him in a lot of catch, a lot of off coverage. Jordan Lewis has been a really big disappointment in coverage this season. He's actually been a decent run defender, in my opinion, and which is is what you want from your cornerback. But he's had especially in the slot, when he's been forced to play in the slot, he's had a really big issue when having to give receivers a two-way go. He's struggled. He doesn't really have the long speed to run with those deep over routes. And then who else? Oh yeah, Anthony Brown. Anthony Brown. He's been okay at times. He's struggled. He's someone who. There's a couple plays every game where he'll have really bad eye discipline, and it will cause situations where the receivers are creating a ton of separation, whether that's on play action passes or whether that's double moves with a pump fake. There just seems to be a couple times every game where Anthony Brown's eyes get the better of him, and that's where teams like Minnesota, who are really good at taking those deep shots, can really take advantage.
Okay. So when you take a look at that matchup, you've got Justin Jefferson, you've got Adam Thielen, you've got, I guess, Chad Beebe. Sorry, it's just that one always surprises me. He's getting the most run out of the third receiver group. When you take a look at that matchup, I mean, what are you thinking when you see it's Chidobe Awuzie and Anthony Brown and Jordan Lewis?
Thinking nothing good. The thing I think that could save the secondary is that the Vikings' run game is having so much success that they don't really throw the ball that much.
Good Lord, dude.
But like Justin Jefferson in the slot against either Anthony Brown or Jordan Lewis, I think is a really big mismatch. I don't like. I think Chidobe Awuzie can hang with Adam Thielen on the outside a little bit, but I don't see why the Vikings would put him on Cheeto's side when they can match him up against Anthony Brown or Jordan Lewis on the other side. So I think Chidobe Awuzie is the one cornerback who I have some confidence in to provide some decent coverage against Jefferson and Thielen, but I just don't trust Jordan Lewis, Anthony Brown. If Savion Smith plays in the game, if they bump him up from the practice squad again to play.
Is that the tiny Alabama guy?
Yeah, he's not very good either, unfortunately for us. But yeah, so I just don't trust those guys to do much. I just don't see how they're gonna be able to consistently be able to provide good coverage, especially given that the Vikings are going to be running so much play action, and the Cowboys just suck against play action.
Okay, time to talk about safeties.
hey, there's some positives here.
Yeah, I've been told that they're quote unquote solid.
they're a little, I'd say a little less than solid, but they're better. They're okay.
They're improving.
Yeah, Donovan Wilson, who's his second year out of Texas A&M, he's actually coming to his own a little bit the last 3 weeks. He's done a really good job in the run game, nailing down, hitting his run fits from depth really well. He's been doing a good job being as the topper free safety pretty adequately. And then you have Xavier Woods. I think Xavier Woods is pretty underrated for what he's not the best run defending safety, but from a coverage standpoint, I think he's really good, especially when he's a single high safety. I think he's one of the better free safeties the Cowboys have had in recent memory. He's can play in the box. He can give you some slot against tight
better
end.
Than Barry Church?
Well, yes, I think he's better than Oh, jeez. Barry Church. Hey, that guy, I like Barry Church. He was fun. That shows you.
No, I mean I liked him too. I had him on my IDP squad.
He got a big contract from Jacksonville, right?
Yeah, no, he did. I mean, because he was racking up those tackle numbers, man.
Yeah. But so they've been pretty good. They've been pretty decent of late. I think they've been the bright spot in the secondary as of late for the Cowboys. But the biggest issue for the Cowboys secondary as a whole is just miscommunications versus bunch versus stack alignments. They've really struggled passing those off adequately. They've done a little bit better job recently, but that's still an area where teams have been able to find a lot of success against them. And I'm going to be interested to see if the Minnesota tries to replicate that this week.
So backing them up are like two draft Twitter favorites: Reggie Robinson, Tulsa; Darian Thompson, I want to say Boise State. How come we aren't seeing them play?
Well, you're seeing draft Twitter wrong? Play. Darian Thompson has arguably been the worst second defensive back the Cowboys have had this season. That shows you how his year has gone. That's why he got replaced by Donovan Wilson 4 weeks ago. And then they've even played number 40, Stephen Parker, over Darian Thompson. That's how bad things have
former
gone.
Viking Stephen Parker.
Oh, he's a former Viking. I didn't even know that.
For like a month.
Oh.
I don't think he even made it to training camp. So.
Yeah. So he's getting run over Darian Thompson in some packages. So that shows you how well things are going for him. And then Reggie Robinson, it seems like it's just a redshirt year for him. He hasn't been active for a single game. He hasn't even played any special team snaps, which is an area where he really thrived at Tulsa. So I don't really know what's going on there. That he was drafted to be a cornerback. They quickly moved him to safety. So I don't really know what's really going on there. It's something that it seems like they're just giving him a redshirt year, and then we'll see what happens in 2021.
I mean, what do you feel about him, just in general?
I don't even know, because he got moved to safety. Because I felt decent about him as a press man corner on the outside because of his ability to press and play bully ball on the outside like he did at Tulsa. And I think he does a really good job playing that, and he does a good job at playing the deep third and cover 3. But then they move him to safety, and I just don't really know how a press corner translates to safety really well. I've been really befuddled by this all season. I've talked about it on a couple other podcasts. This has been a move. That's why I kind of just want to see him play to see, like, what are you guys really envisioning here? Because it's really hard for me, based on what he did in college, to really envision him as a safety.
Yeah, that's fair. You brought it up, so let's talk about the special teams real quick.
The nice winder.
The nice winder. So a 2-footed punter, if you can believe it. He's got both of his feet. So he can punt left-footed or right-footed?
Yeah, he can punt with both of his feet. And Fossil has kind of hinted that there might be some things where he might punt with either foot situations. That hasn't came up yet, but I'm going to be interested to see what Fossil has cooking up, because he's someone who we all know gets kind of nutty with his special teams plays.
So, yeah, he's into the tricks.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what he's got cooking up with him.
They're going to screw up the Gunners a little bit
soon. He's gonna uncork punt trick play soon. I'm ready for it.
So I know that you love talking about special teams, but okay. So you got a punter that can punt with either foot. Doesn't that like screw up the Gunners?
I have no idea. To be honest, man, I have no idea. I know he's been punting with the same foot the whole time this year. I think his right foot is the one that he's better with, so that's like his primary kicking foot. So I don't think it's really messed with the Gunners yet. So I have no idea if he for just some reason kicks with his left foot, if it's going to mess with the spin and trajectory of them. I have no idea, bro. I'm just saying shit.
Okay. So you've also got Greg DeLeg, who has been fine?
Yeah, he's been so much better than Brett Maher was last year. So I've been
Low
actually
ball.
very happy with Greg Zuerlein. This has been one of the areas where I've been happy. He kicks the ball out of the end zone really well on kickoffs too. Makes me happy. I like it.
All right. And then just to satisfy my curiosities, what's the deal with Siwo Olenilua? He was on the freaks list for Bruce Feldman, like bench for days. Anything on him?
He was moved to fullback during training camp, and then they called him up one game when it was against Pittsburgh. They called him up to the active roster as one of their 2 practice squatters because Ezekiel Elliott. They didn't know if he was going to play because he had a knee injury. But
okay. And then
there hasn't been much. He hasn't played this year. He hasn't gotten any snaps. I just know that they moved him to fullback during the training camp because they like his pass catching ability from there.
Oh, okay.
So that's basically all I've heard about him. I'm someone who I'm excited about. I really liked him and Rico Dowdle, who's the team's actual third running back. I thought they were both really intriguing talents coming out of college. So it's going to be interesting to see moving forward 2021 and beyond what they're going to do, because I don't think this team is going to be really, especially if Ezekiel Elliott keeps performing like he is now, I don't think he's going to be on the team probably in 2022.
And former Viking Cole Hikatini.
Oh, Hikatini, no idea about him. Hasn't gotten any run. He's been on the practice squad. Hasn't gotten much. So haven't really. I think he's like the 5th tight end behind Schultz, Belldozer, McKeon. No, number 4 now. He was number 5 when Blake Jarwin was there.
Right. And then we got a couple of listener questions you might as well answer. So, question for the guest: who would you rather see start? Andy Dalton, who could possibly mess up your draft pick, or the great Ben DiNucci, who will lead you to greatness via the sidearm? That's from Kenneth Allen.
The thing is, I don't think Andy Dalton's going to mess up our draft slot, sir. So play him just because my eyes hurt when I see DiNucci play. So at least my eyes can process what Dalton's doing out there. So I'll say him.
All right. Yannick Ngakoue has only missed 1 game in his career and has started all but 3 of those games played. During his career, teams are 26-46 when playing him. Is he the reason the Vikings started 1-5 and why the Ravens have looked so bad the last 3 weeks?
100%.
100%.
I mean, obviously there's something just about his aura. You know, he ran under some ladders or something. He has a black cat crossed his path, broke a mirror, something. He just got bad booty. You got to get him out of there. Get him out of there, Baltimore.
and Thanksgiving's a little bit different for Cowboys fans than it is for a lot of people because they always play. What's your Thanksgiving planned usually?
Usually this year's a little bit differently, but usually what we do is we go to my family in the morning, and then we have our first Thanksgiving there, get nice, big and full, and then we'll go over to my wife's family right after that and get our second Thanksgiving meal, just so we can get that extra 3 or 4 pounds that we knew we wanted after that first Thanksgiving.
You need to gain it. Yeah.
But this year I'm just staying at home, covering the game, with COVID and everything, trying to stay safe with everything. So yeah.
You got like a particular cooking plan in mind, or are you just gonna like Uber Eats it or what?
No, I'm probably gonna. The thing that I do whenever I'm by myself is I make pan fried pork chops. So I'll probably do that just like I do every other pan fried pork chops and mashed potatoes, baby.
That's not bad, man.
Thanksgiving. The thing is, we have there's like a herd of turkeys, a gaggle of turkeys, I think it's called, that live in our neighborhood that just roam free. So maybe I might have to go snatch me one and smoke it on the smoker or something. But I'm not even kidding. We do have there's a couple of gaggle of turkeys that live in our neighborhood and run up and down our street. We have a turkey whisperer on our street that herds them all the time. It's nice.
Wait, like somebody in your neighborhood has taken upon themselves to direct the turkeys?
Yeah, and he feeds them. He even he went the whole mile. Even in his backyard, he put little pegs on trees so that they can fly up onto them and sleep on them and stuff.
Is he gonna betray them? I mean, this is the perfect time.
We thought maybe he's someone who was a turkey raiser and he'd sell them for Thanksgiving or something to for people who wanted nice plump turkeys. But no, we've been here for 4 years, and same ones. None of them dying. They get babies every year. They come in. The herd just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's crazy.
That's wild. Have you ever dealt with an angry turkey?
Yes, they've chased me on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's brutal, man.
Yeah, luckily that was when our pups were small. Now that our dogs are bad, they run. As soon as they see us walking down the street, they just disperse. But they don't care. Like when cars are, a couple of them have gotten hit by cars because they do not pay any attention to cars. The cars are honking at them. They don't move any faster. They just slowly trot across that street. They don't give a shit about no cars, man.
Uppity bastards, man.
They don't care. They don't care. But that's why, like, once a month, you'll see like a dead turkey on the side. Like, damn it, there was somebody just didn't want to wait for the turkeys to cross the street.
And that's your problem. You got to deal with it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, man. Is there anything you want to plug?
Oh, yeah. Just check me out at the Dallas Morning News, Dallas News /sports/football. Read my articles there. Follow me on Twitter at John Owning, JOHNOWNING. Besides that, thanks for having me on, man. It was a fun time talking about the misery that has been the 2020 Cowboy season.
Oh, I didn't even ask. Hey, who's going to win? By how much?
Oh, I predicted in the Dallas Morning News, I think the Vikings would win by 5. I think
okay.
by 5. I thought it was going to be relatively close, or a garbage time touchdown would make it close. One of those two things.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, thanks so much for coming on, man. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. You too.
All right, let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is from Tim. He asks, does Andy Dalton's record versus common/uncommon opponents via John Goodberry when he was in Cincinnati apply to Zimmer's familiarity with him? Does Zimmer's familiarity with Dalton give a slight edge?
Yeah, so I'm actually pleasantly surprised that someone asked this because as much as Joe has tried to put the statistic out there, it just hasn't seemed to have gained a lot of traction. He's discovered it, I think, since 2016, and he's been tracking it. And largely it includes teams that have played Dalton within the previous 3 years when they record the common statistic at least like 4 times or something like that. Or no, had played them once within 2 years. So never mind. So it's actually a little bit more generous in the way it casts its net. Either way, against uncommon opponents, Andy Dalton has done really, really well. So he's got it all the way up to 2017. And then he also says there's an exception for when Bill Lazor, who the Vikings just eviscerated, but when Bill Lazor was the offensive coordinator for them in 2018. So it goes all the way up to 2017. And in that statistic, Andy Dalton against common opponents went 469, so 18-24, with a sub 60 completion rating, 6.7 rate, 6.7 yards per attempt, 3.2 touchdown percentage, 3.1 interception percentage, and a passer rating of 77.5, and an ESPN total QBR of 42.4, which incidentally, like, everything there is pretty bad except the touchdown percentage, which is about league average for that period. Against uncommon opponents that hadn't seen him that much, he's 29-8-2, so that's a 69-6. So I guess both of those percentages are #nice. A 66.8 completion percentage, 8.0 yards per attempt, 6.1% touchdown rate, 2.3 interception rate, pass rating of 101.6, and an ESPN QBR of 66.9. Again, nice. So he has done at about a Pro Bowl level for the most part, and this includes, his like insane 2015 year, but at a Pro Bowl level against uncommon opponents, and has played at about replacement level against common opponents. And I think that this is like a really interesting statistic. Joe Goodberry goes into it in a lot of detail in a piece that he wrote for The Athletic. So I'm going to link that in the show notes. And he found that teams that played the Bengals a lot more often were ones that, quote, disguised their looks, dropped defenders into zone coverage a little bit more often, forced Dalton to hold onto the football a little bit longer, which results in sacks, inefficiency, mistakes, checkdowns, etc. The only issue I have with this is if you think about who his most common opponents are, they include the Steelers and the Ravens, who show up in his common opponents significantly more often than any particular team against uncommon opponents. And they've typically, over the course of this period,
it's almost like they were in his division.
Right, exactly. And so they typically over this period have had some really good defenses. So him struggling against good divisional opponents is not like remarkable, but I will say that he still underperformed versus, like, even after you take into account that they're better defenses, he still underperformed against them. And notably, Cleveland for most of this period of time did not have a great defense. Houston ended up being a common opponent a significant number of times, kind of like the same way that the Vikings seem to play the Seahawks all the time. And he struggled against them too. So there is something there, but you just have to keep in mind, like, hey, but also some of these are good defenses. I'll link the full article a little bit more. He says that Bill Lazor was able to turn it around by installing some RPOs and stuff like that. Now, as to whether or not this applies to Zimmer, I'll say kind of, because I think one thing that Zimmer does really well, and we've mentioned it, I think a lot more this season than any other season, is game plan specific to the quarterback. And I think that knowing kind of what Andy Dalton does and how he plays, that's going to be pretty big in terms of the game plan. He'll be able to provide, I think, a really detailed scouting report to that defense. One thing that I found kind of interesting, I was listening to, I want to say, at Coach Vass's podcast, Make Defense Great Again. And on it, he actually had former, and well, actually, I don't know if, I think is he at Michigan now? The Dean Pease, a defensive coordinator, former Baltimore Ravens, former New England Patriots, former Tennessee Titans, defensive coordinator. I don't know where he is now, but so he's actually, I guess he might be retired, but he was really remarkable with the Ravens as a defensive coordinator, and so that's probably where he gets most of his reputation. I think for a while he was considered a head coaching candidate, never got around to it. We'll see if he gets a job for 2021, but he spent a while with the New England Patriots as their defensive coordinator 2006 2009. And one thing that Coach Vass asked him was, how much time? So Bill Belichick is like a notable defensive coach. He was a defensive coordinator for the Giants, and is really remarkable at like defensive coaching. How much time does he spend with the team? And in that, Dean Pease said that actually for the entire week, Belichick only spent about 45 minutes with the defense, and he spent the rest of the time prepping out the quarterback. So a head coach with a defensive background does not necessarily spend that much time in meeting rooms with the defense. I don't think that's true for Zimmer, and I especially don't think that would be true this week, given that kind of familiarity. I think that he'll be spending a lot of time making sure that the defense kind of knows all the little ticks and quirks that he's noticed from Andy Dalton over the years. And so I think that is going to be a pretty big part of the game plan. And I think that Dalton, who has already played poorly this year for the Cowboys, will probably continue to play poorly against the Vikings, specifically just because that familiarity thing is going to make it really difficult for Dalton to kind of overcome. On the flip side, you would be able to want to say Dalton should be familiar with Zimmer's defense, but we know that his familiarity with opposing defenses does not seem to produce a concurrent effect. So he does not seem to be as adaptable as a quarterback as the defenses are to him. So yeah, that's a good shout. I'll include that podcast appearance with Dean Pease in the show notes. I'll include that athletic piece. But yeah, that was a good good thing to remember, because I had almost forgotten it because it for some reason had never caught on.
Next question is from Andrew Shad, who asks, is Viking struggling against backup quarterbacks more fact or meme? With Zimmer tailoring his scheme-specific quarterbacks, I could see how a backup with a little film could throw a wrench into the plan. Or is it just us latching onto an apparent trend that might not really be there?
Yeah, so I was pretty curious about this because, like, what if like they're just shockingly bad against, and they don't have to have like a losing record against backup quarterbacks, but like, what if the record is just slightly worse than you'd expect? Is there something there? If Zimmer is as dependent on this game specific coaching, would that mean that that he can't do it if he doesn't have like a specific game plan to work off of. And so I was pretty curious about this. So I looked up how he's done against backup quarterbacks. I was only really able to get a sample of about 16 because it turns out backup quarterbacks are backups because they don't play that often. Imagine that. And only games where they threw 10 or more attempts. So in some of these games, like Matt Castle comes in partway through for Detroit and throws 11 passes. Some of these games, it's like Austin Davis, and they start the game and then they leave partway through. Or some of the games, it's they were not intended to be the start at the beginning of the season, but they are continuing to start because they're being forced to. Like the second time the Vikings played Brett Hundley after Anthony Barr, I guess, took out Aaron Rodgers. So their record in those games is 4-12. The backups record is 4-12. The Vikings record is 12-4. They've been able to keep their opponents to 6.2 yards per attempt, which is pretty below average, but it's not like insanely below average. The key here is that they've been able to produce tons of turnovers against those players. And so they've been able to produce sacks and turnovers. So an adjusted net yards per attempt of 4.27, this is a 16-game season, essentially. That over the course of a season is dead last in the NFL. It's worse than like Jared Goff's rookie year, which was like famously bad. They do better against backup quarterbacks. They don't do like notably worse. It's just we remember the game against Chase Daniel. We remember the game against Matt Moore. We remember the game against Nick Foles in Philadelphia. Against Chicago, they cleaned up against Nick Foles. I don't think it's like a particular thing. And I was curious enough about this that I decided also to compare it to what happens when they play like starters and compare that. And against starters, they produce so they're still better than league average, as you'd expect. A completion rate of 63.9, yards per attempt of 6.98, which is below average, and an adjusted net yards per attempt of 5.81, which is somewhat significantly below average. So there is a substantial difference between the way they play starters versus the way they play backups. It's just easy to remember those 4 wins, or really 3 of those 4 wins. No one really talks about like the time they lost to Kyle Orton.
They don't seem to obsess about it as much anyway.
Yeah. Also, that was in 2014, so I don't think anyone really remembers it. They don't seem to do significantly worse against backup quarterbacks. It's easy to remember some of them. But like they crushed David Blau. They beat the pants off of the combined efforts of Austin Davis and Sean Hill. They beat Chase Daniel this year. They beat Nick Foles this year. They beat Brett Hundley both times. They beat Matt Barkley, and they crushed Deshaun Kaiser. So, they do all right.
Next question is from Steezo, who asks, with the number of young cornerbacks playing well, are there any of them that you could see transitioning to free safety next season, with Harris likely moving on?
That's a really interesting question. So I don't think so. If they are really happy with all these guys, and obviously some of these players are going to come back, and it's going to crowd the roster. The Vikings are probably going to have a couple of draft picks unless they like trade up for a guy. So it's going to kind of crowd things up. So the natural player to pick for that is Harrison Hand, who a lot of people consider to be a potential safety convert coming out of the draft, just because he doesn't have the straight line speed, but he does have the recognition. He's got the physicality that you want at safety, and so on and so forth. So he's a guy that you might be able to transition to safety. I would not look to Holton Hill or Chris Boyd or Jeff Gladney or Cameron Dantzler as potential safeties. Obviously, Gladney and Dantzler are going to be long-term starters at corner, so that's kind of a non-starter anyway. Maybe Chris Jones. I kind of want to watch a little bit more of him just so I can get kind of a better understanding of this player. And I could see Mike Hughes, but I really doubt it. And I feel like this is a situation where Hughes would rather kind of play out his contract, avoid the 5th-year option, and try cornerback out for another team instead of play safety. But I could see that, but you're just not likely to see that for a first round pick at corner. So really the only option would be Harrison Hand. But I do think that that's an interesting question.
Next question is from Kyle Slaby. He asks, Yannick Ngakoue has only missed one game in his career and started all but 3 of those games played. During his career, teams are 26 and 46 when playing him. Is he the reason we started 1-5 and why the Ravens have looked so bad the last 3 weeks? Is this, I'll add to his question, is he a Ewing theory candidate?
Oh, that's it's a throwback to some old Bill Simmons columns. So I asked this obviously in the interview with Owning, but yeah, I think more seriously, probably not. I mean, he's played on a bunch of bad Jaguars teams. One good Jaguars team, but the rest of those were bad teams. So no, I don't think so. He's played well. I don't think it's like a situation where he brings everybody down. The thing about Ewing and Ewing theory is that he's one player of 5. And so if he becomes like kind of this black hole where he looks like a good player, but he's forcing inefficient play from other people, I actually don't know like why Ewing theory would be true. It's just like a really interesting Bill Simmons idea. But I guess the only way, if it were true, the only way that would be true is that even though he's a great player, he's forcing inefficient play from everybody else. I don't think that that's a situation that you get from someone like Yannick Ngakoue. I think that that's just kind of, I mean, and it's also like the Ravens play like, some pretty good teams. So I don't think so, but it is kind of fun to track.
So the Ewing theory, for those who are not familiar, is when a player on your team, star player typically, is traded away and the team is immediately better and ends up making it to like the finals that year. In the case of the NBA, it was Patrick Ewing had been on the team for forever, and 15, 16 years, whatever, and then he left, and the next year they were in the NBA finals. So it becomes a question of, well, was he the thing that held them back? So that's where the Ewing theory name anyway comes from. And so I
think Bill Simmons also did some like games he was injured versus not injured splits too, and it came true.
There were some amazing columns that he had written back when he wrote and I guess cared about the stuff that he was talking about. Admittedly, I love the book of basketball, but like there were a lot of mailed in things in the last, I want to say 10 years, but yeah, back when he really cared, boy, the Ewing theory was like peak Bill Simmons.
It was that it's the quintessential Bill Simmons.
That and the full on CSI style breakdown of the Atlanta strip club article. That one is pure gold, along with the levels of losing as well. So
the levels of losing is a classic.
Yeah. Next question, now that we've gone off on the Ewing theory, is from Wes, who asks, like any self-respecting Vikings fan, a backup quarterback frightens me. If Andy Dalton leads the Cowboys to a win, how does he do it? Is there any part of his quote-unquote game that should worry the defense? The COVID and concussion-free Dalton is playing, right?
Yeah, it seems like Dalton is playing. It sounds like, according to Owning, he might rather have Garrett Gilbert play, and I'm on that train. Get the AAF MVP going, kind of bring some more glory to the Orlando Apollos, who already have D'Ernest Johnson was playing pretty well for the Cleveland Browns. So we know that the Orlando Apollos were NFL ready if they had just gotten a chance to be an expansion franchise.
But what about our boy Ben DiNucci?
It's tough, right? You've got 2 really great quarterbacks on the team, 2 really phenomenal players, and it's like a Joe Montana, Steve Young situation. Like at some point, you have to pick one and go with it. And I think Ben DiNucci's story works better as the Steve Young story, right? Because Steve Young, drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, did not work out for them, right? He was a second round pick. He did not work out for them, and he had to go to another team and kind of discover how good he was, right? And Joe Montana, had to leave to Kansas City before Steve Young could end up playing. I think it might be the other way around, where Ben DiNucci has to go to another franchise that knows how to use him. But
is that the Eagles or is that the Vikings?
The energy of him being on the Eagles would make me combust. We cannot have that. But in division, I think, to continue playing Carson Wentz for as long as he is an Eagle. So Actually, no, a team that knows how to use him would by definition not be in the NFC East. So
I don't know. The day that Ben DiNucci beats out Carson Wentz for a starting position, I think is the day you retire. And you're like, nope.
Right. So that's it. I'm gone. Bye, guys.
I can't. This is it. You guys don't seem to realize I have to walk away from this now.
Right. This is the George Costanza. I got to leave on a high note.
Exactly.
But yeah, I kind of asked owning this, but I did not seem particularly confident. So the solution here is, the skill players are so good that they elevate Dalton's level of play, especially if they keep on finding ways to get open, intermediate over the middle, maybe play action to keep the linebackers, crowded up at the line, create that space over the middle, get CeeDee Lamb out of the slot in that matchup against Gladney, and create some additional space. So that's kind of how it would happen. Just probably repeated play action, repeated ways to get linebackers moving, maybe motion to get them just kind of out of a sync and out of their ability to kind of cover the middle. And obviously the Vikings are really great at halftime adjustments. So, something would have to be done there. But I imagine at that point, they can start working some other things in to take advantage of the way that you adjust to the middle of the field. Maybe, let Andy Dalton just one or two deep throws just to keep the defense honest and make sure that they can't do that. So I think that's kind of how it happens. Honestly, I am surprised that the spread is 7 points. I think that the Vikings are better, but I think Vegas is pricing in the fact that the Vikings are not just the team that just went on a 3-game winning streak. They're also the team that started out 1-5. They're both teams. And so that's probably what is priced into the spread. I'm remembering the team that just rattled off 3 wins. Vegas is remembering the team that also happened to lose 5 games. So there's probably a little bit of give and play here, but I really think that this Vikings team is just significantly better.
Next question is from Matt McKeon, who asks, when's the next loss on the schedule and when is the last one for the season?
Yeah, we go over the Vikings schedule a lot on this show. Like, I think more than, which it doesn't sound all that fascinating for a Vikings podcast, but like a lot more than we have in other years, right? Like, we're like, oh, the rest of the schedule looks pretty easy. Let's talk about them. But yeah, so assuming that they don't lose to, it might be the PJ Walker Panthers, the XFL MVP. But assuming they don't lose to the Carolina Panthers, I would think that their next loss is to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I would think that their last loss, I can't really see them losing to Jameis. They're probably going to take a bad loss somewhere on this schedule, but now that Drew Brees is probably out, cracked ribs and a collapsed lung, he's going to be out for a while, right? They didn't put him on IR, so I guess they must expect him back soon. But I would imagine that the next loss in the schedule is probably the first round of the playoffs, because I don't really see the Vikings being a great playoff team at this point. Yeah, I guess if they finish off this schedule with like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if they go 6-1 for the rest of the schedule, that's a team that a bunch of people are going to be calling like dark horses to win it all, right?
And we get to laugh at all of them. Yeah,
they can't have that energy. They need that loss to the Saints so that people can't expect too much of them. But yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say it's the Saints. I'm going to say that's the last loss. Jameis is a better quarterback than he's given credit for. He can see now. I think that's pretty underrated. He did not look great.
Sight is his new superpower.
It is.
I forget that he had that he had corrective surgery over the off season, and was like, oh, hey, I can read now.
Yeah, like I am shocked he got this far into the NFL without it, which tells you he's very talented. He just needs to be able to see.
Is that what it tells us?
So next loss is Tampa Bay. Final loss is New Orleans. They go probably go 5-2, I guess. Yeah, they're probably going to take a bad loss somewhere. So it seems like more of a 4-3 team, despite how easy that schedule looks. But yeah, why not?
Looking at the schedule right now,
it's so hard to actually see these losses outside of Tampa Bay, right?
Nope. I see the Vikings losing to the Cowboys. I see some dumb thing happening where the Vikings don't show up.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's fair.
I'm just throwing.
Actually,
I said it.
I think I said it on the football machine. I was like, No, it wasn't even on the phone. It was on like another podcast. I was a podcast guest, and they were like, "Yeah, the Vikings should wrap this up." And I was like, "Well, they did blow it against the 17-point underdog Buffalo Bills like not too long ago. This is a team that's going to do that sort of thing."
Yeah, they just sort of have that sort of energy. Um,
But outside of that, like voodoo, which they overcame a lot of voodoo in Soldier Field, right?
yeah,
And Soldier Field was doing everything it could to reassert its dominance over the Vikings. And it's still like the Bears were just so bad it didn't matter.
never underestimate this team's ability to play down to the level of competition. Never. The moment that you
When
do
was the
that,
last time they had a blowout win?
was that the game against the? No, it wasn't the game against the Titans. Was that the game against the Texans? That was 31-23.
That's not a blowout win. I don't think they've had a blowout win this year. Let me take a look at the team game fight, because if they haven't had that many blowout wins, despite how good they were in 2017, that's concerning, right? Like that's pretty good evidence that they don't they always like play down to their competition.
What I really want is for Tampa Bay to crater and New Orleans to get a playoff spot, and then the Vikings play New Orleans, and then the Vikings beat New Orleans again. Like, that seems to be the only team that the Vikings and Zimmer can beat in the playoffs. So if we can get that in the first round, that would be a win for me. I think that would be good for me.
December 15th against, if we don't count the Detroit game, which maybe you could, December 15th against the Chargers. I barely remember that game because it was like,
well, that was
right after that game was that disastrous Green Bay game.
Well, yes, but that
was like the 5 turnover game from Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, that was a work of art. That was poetry.
Yeah, that was pretty phenomenal.
That was the game that created all the memes of, wow, there really are no fans in Los Angeles for the Chargers.
Yeah. And then there was technically two three-score games that year, back-to-back in October against the Giants in Philadelphia, both wins by 18 points. That Giants game, I think, was a bigger win. Then a 20-point win over Oakland. So they had like 3 or 4 of them last year. It just doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, just
okay.
Yeah.
They had a 41-17 win over Miami in 2018.
Yep, sure did.
I mean, the only Miami game I remember is the one that they got destroyed because like the punt blocks and stuff.
Well, yeah. No,
2015, I think.
I think the Vikings somehow managed to mess this one up, and I think the last loss to the Deshaun Kaiser-led Bears in on December 20th.
No, I think it's the Kyle Sloter-led Bears. I think that's how it happens. That's like way funnier.
Well, it is, but the fact that the Kaiser is being brought in just still makes me laugh. John Belk asks, assuming all the first-round rookies continue their current trajectory, would the Vikings have been better off making a Godfather offer for Tua or Herbert, or keeping their 2020 class as it is?
Assuming the first-round rookies continue their trajectory? Absolutely make a Godfather offer. So obviously you lose Gladney and Jefferson. And Jefferson's the best offensive player, right? But the quarterback position is just way more important, right? Justin Herbert is on just this incredible tear. And so if the Vikings could have traded up to grab him, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, Herbert only played because Tyrod got injured, right? But I think at some point we would have seen Herbert play, just kind of given how Cousins has played at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't have even required Kirk Cousins getting a punctured lung. Yeah,
you'd have just been like, yeah, he got dinged up out there. He's breathing pretty hard. Look at that. Herbert, get in there. But yeah, I mean, the stability that you get at quarterback, the importance of that position, even slight upgrades at quarterback are bigger than large upgrades at receiver. Obviously, Herbert wouldn't have the supporting cast here in Minnesota that he would have there because he has 2 receivers there. And in this scenario, they both traded away Diggs and did not draft Justin Jefferson. But I imagine kind of later in the draft, they'll probably grab some of the receivers that have actually shown out pretty well. So if they had gotten like a Michael Pittman or a Chase Claypool or something, that wouldn't have been bad. Or even like, it doesn't have to be like someone like that obviously good, like a Like a Gabriel Davis wouldn't have been bad either, right? But yeah, it would have been tough because I think the team is not necessarily better this year, although I think Herbert is better than Cousins. So that possibility does indeed exist. But I think that you create just a really great floor for yourself. And remember, we have this assumption that the first round rookies are continuing their trajectory. So yeah, I think that the Godfather offer for Herbert makes a ton of sense. You get a quarterback of the future, yeah, absolutely, do it every time. I don't know. I think they may not make the playoffs in that scenario. I don't know, but I mean, they've only got like a 30% chance to make the playoffs now anyway. So I would think that you would do it.
Next question is from Ricardo, who asks, is it possible that the best long-term strategy for Viking success is to pay whatever it takes, draft picks, cash, firstborn, etc., to convince Chicago and Detroit ownership to not clean house?
I am not scared of Chicago and Detroit getting new people in there. Like, they did that last time and it didn't work. Like, they continue getting new people in there and it doesn't work. The best coach that they've had over the past combined over the past decade has been like Jim Caldwell. Like, okay, fine.
I remember celebrating I remember celebrating on Sunday when the Lions were able to eke out that win. And I remember messaging my buddy in Michigan and like doing a Groundhog's Day thing, like, "Yay, 6 more weeks of Matt Patricia!" Like,
yeah, no, I think I don't think you have to worry about that. I would keep the cash and the draft picks and the babies
and the firstborns.
Yeah, probably don't give those away.
Maybe. Jeremy asks, question for the pod, how would you rate Kubiak's play calling? Seems like it's improved, but it was a bit dismaying to see runs on first and second down, despite their lack of success. The offense is still successful, but it feels like more throws to Jefferson, Thielen, Irv, Smith on early downs would help us be more effective.
I'd give it an A. I think that it is very easy to get caught up in these things that are very easy to identify as mistakes. And I agree, the second and long runs are mistakes. The second and short runs are mistakes. Basically, try not to run it on second down. But I think that there's a lot of instances where you can say that is an instance of probably poor play calling. Like, you should not be running it as often as you do on second and long. You should not be running it as often as you do on first and long, although they've gotten a lot better at that. You should be using 11 personnel a little bit more. You should be targeting kind of these receivers. But the thing is, the Vikings have one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL right now. I don't think they're the best offense in the NFL. Like, I think, if you had an all-time defense and it was just the Chiefs offense versus the Vikings offense would get obliterated, right? Like, I don't really think they've got the best offense in the NFL, but it is meaningful, right? That they've got the most efficient offense by yards per play and by expected points. And the areas where the offense is falling short. So what's really interesting is that the Vikings are about like 10th in points per drive, but they're first in yards per play and first in expected points. So why aren't they scoring points? Well, your first thought is, well, they must not be very good in the red zone. And it turns out the Vikings actually on offense have a great red zone touchdown conversion rate. So they must be punting it outside of the red zone or turning it over a lot. And the Vikings are turning over the ball a fair amount, but like the 12th the most per drive. Like, it's very weird. But I think that kind of explains it, that they stall out somewhere in the middle of the field and punt or turn it over. Generally speaking, turnovers are not usually on the offensive coordinator very often. Like, it's very clearly just kind of on the quarterback to make the right read or be more accurate, throw the ball away. So if you kind of get rid of the turnover part of the equation, or at least kind of diminish it, this is an offense that is on track to or is scoring a lot of points. So at the end of the day, there are certainly areas to improve for the offense. There's no question about that. And there are very clear areas to identify where to improve that offense. But despite all that, it is a remarkably efficient offense. And I don't think that you need to alter some of the way that the progressions are working all that much in order to get things going. Should they target Justin Jefferson more? I don't know. Maybe the amount that they're targeting him is the precise amount in order to kind of be as efficient as you want. If you start forcing it, if you start Randy ratioing it, you begin kind of losing a lot of that efficiency, and it's better to throw to Adam Thielen, or it's better to throw to Irv Smith or something. So, and they put in a lot of plays to throw to Irv Smith early in the season, and they had to decline those based on the looks they were getting. And so it's not even that the play wasn't designed to have a progression that went there. It was that, the defense had called the particular, coverage necessary to prevent that from happening. So yeah, it'd be, and maybe that's built off of like things that the offensive coordinator is not super responsible for, like Dalvin Cook breaking off a 70-yard run is like not, like that's not the play design, right? That's like the blocking worked out, and Dalvin Cook is amazing, right? Like that play is designed to get you like 6 to 8 yards. So like, some of that is not necessarily entirely in the offensive coordinator, but I think that you take a look at where the offense was and how it's grown, and you take a look at where we expected the offense to be at the beginning of the season and where it is now. Like, even if you didn't expect the offense to be as bad as it was at the beginning of the season, and I think very few people expected that, I think most of us expected the offense to take a step back because you probably got worse on the offensive line by losing Josh Klein. You almost certainly got worse at receiver based off of the information that we had by going from Stephon Diggs to Olabisi Johnson. And the only thing that you could rely on is maybe some more development from Irv Smith. There was a risk that Adam Thielen wasn't going to return to form after returning from injury. And maybe Ezra Cleveland would at some point, mind you, at this time, Ezra Cleveland was third string. He wasn't even second string. Maybe Ezra Cleveland would take a jump in development at some point and play in the season. So our expectation was that the offense would be worse than it is. It is playing very well right now. So I would give him an A. I know that there are areas to improve. The thing is, the areas that he's good at are hard to identify. The areas that he can improve on are easy to identify. So it's easy to over-focus on the things that are easy to identify. But the results, and we do want to prioritize process over results, but still, the results so far have been really good. So I would give him an A.
Next question is from Paul, who asks, is winning out a must to make the playoffs, given they are at least 2 games behind all of the top teams in the NFC? Which of the 4 NFC teams with 3 losses is most likely to lose 2 to 3 more and put the Vikings over the hump? This question was also asked right before the Cardinals' loss tonight.
Yeah, so that means the Vikings are only 1 game back against 7th seed Cardinals. Also, the Rams could lose, and that would kind of improve things for the Vikings. So, so the winning out is not necessary in that case, right? Because some of these teams, I think, are expected to lose. Like the Rams schedule is just going to get tougher and tougher the further away they get from that NFC East beginning that they had. And they've got, I think, a lot of the NFC West left on their schedule. So there's that. If you take a look at some of the 538 odds right now, because if the Vikings win against Dallas, lose against Carolina, and win against Jacksonville, which I think is the most likely scenario that's going to be pessimistic, right? Like I think the most likely scenario is that they win all 3, but the most likely scenario that we come away from this 3-game stretch disappointed, they still have a 1 in 4 chance to make the playoffs. So they don't need to win out, right? If we see like another loss for the Cardinals, and they're going up against the Patriots, that's possible. They're also going up against the Rams, that's possible. So if we see another loss for the Cardinals, now the Vikings have better odds than the Cardinals to make the playoffs if they win the next 3 and the Cardinals lose 1 of the next 2. If the Vikings lose against Carolina and they lose against the Rams, the Cardinals' ability to make the playoffs from a percentage perspective is about twice that of the Vikings, but it's only 60. And so the Vikings still have a pretty decent shot to make it. So you don't need to win out. Obviously, winning out improves your odds pretty tremendously. And if they come out of this next 3-game stretch 3-0, they've got a 60% chance. The Vikings have a 60% chance or so of making the playoffs. So obviously, the Cardinals are the team that it would be nice to see lose most often. If the Rams lose against Tampa Bay, their odds drop all the way to 64%, and the Vikings' odds increase just kind of slightly in that scenario. Really, they want one of those teams to lose and continue to lose out. I don't think you're going to get much traction from seeing additional losses from the Packers, Saints, or Seahawks. So that's not going to mean a ton. But seeing the Cardinals and the Rams kind of lose out, obviously seeing the Bears lose a couple of games will help. If the Bears lose against Green Bay, which I think is likely, that slightly improves the odds for the Vikings, even if they win against Detroit. So they don't have to win out. Obviously, that will improve the odds the most. But if they lose against Carolina, but the Rams lose to Tampa Bay and the Bears lose to Green Bay next week, the Vikings still have better than 1-4 odds. And if the Rams lose, and if the Cardinals lose one of their next two games, then the Vikings odds improve to 1-3. So yeah, there's all kinds of scenarios now that you can play around with where the Vikings kind of still make the playoffs, even if they don't win the rest of their games. Just because some of these teams are hitting a really difficult portion of their schedule. Part of the reason that they're 6-3 is because they had a schedule that made it a little bit easier to go 6-3. So a team like the Rams, a team like the Cardinals, they're going to hit some relatively difficult opponents. Although the caveat here is I have no idea how good the Patriots are. They could be good, they could be bad. But yeah, and even after that, there's some pretty difficult matchups for some of these teams, right? The Rams then have to play the Patriots in Week 14, and if the Patriots indeed have become good again because Cam is fully recovered, or they have the ability to practice again, or whatever, that'd be great for them. I think who do the Rams play in Week 15? The Jets. That doesn't matter. But yeah, and then the Rams play the Seahawks, and at that point, you're kind of hoping for the Rams to lose. The Cardinals play the 49ers. You're kind of hoping for the Cardinals to lose that one. And at that point, the Vikings odds jump up dramatically, even with a loss, if they take two more losses on the schedule. So you don't have to win out. Obviously, that would help the most. And then whoever's doing worse, you want to lose the Week 17 matchup between the Rams and the Cardinals, obviously. And I think that's probably going to be a battle for the 6th seed. And whoever loses is going to be 8th seed, and the Vikings will be able to take the 7th seed. And you want the team that has the worst record to lose that one.
All right, next question is from Duke's Code, who asks, Ben DiNucci is getting the Tom Brady Tom Brady at Michigan treatment. How do we liberate him?
Yeah, I think this is a scenario where you just kind of have to trust the story to play out. And anyone who missed it a couple episodes ago, we talked about kind of the hero's journey that Ben DiNucci is taking right now. And, it's a tough one. I think that for him to kind of fulfill the Steve Young expectations that we collectively have of him, he has to go through the Steve Young journey. He's got to struggle for a little bit. He's going to play behind Garrett Gilbert and see somebody that excellent, succeed. I don't think it's a Tom Brady. Drew Stanton? That was not Drew Stanton, was it?
Are you talking about
Drew Henson?
There you go.
Yeah. I was like, no, it cannot be Drew Stanton. He did not go to Michigan. Drew Henson. I don't think, because they alternated in game, right? It was first half Tom Brady, second half Drew Henson. It's not going to be that, right? I think that it's going to be closer to the Steve Young experience. Ben DiNucci is just going to have to go to another team. But I understand it's going to be tough. But I think the difficulty of the journey is what makes it worth it when it comes to Ben DiNucci.
Real HG asks, should we be worried about the campaign to get Yannick Ngakoue into the Pro Bowl? My Packers fan friend said he voted 300 times already. I would question that because I don't know very many Packers fans who can count to 300.
Well, I mean, that would not make it a lie necessarily, right? It's just if he thinks that he's voted 300 times, then he's not lying by intention.
No, it's the lie within his heart.
Right. So for people unfamiliar, there is a movement among Jaguars fans that have been picked up by Packers and Bears fans. And I think it got put initially into the Jaguars subreddit and then cross-posted to a couple of other subreddits. Then from there, it kind of made its way onto Twitter. That they vote Yannick Ngakoue to the Pro Bowl. And by that, the Vikings have to sacrifice a 4th round conditional pick instead of a 5th round pick, I think is the idea. But I think that condition also follows him to the Ravens. So the Vikings would get a 5th round pick if he makes the Pro Bowl. And so all you're doing is you're dropping a round because it's no longer a 6th round pick or something like that. I'm going to take a look at the Yannick Ngakoue trade.
I'm just envisioning naming this episode the Yannick Ngakoue movement.
Oh, yeah. So he was traded to the Ravens for a conditional 5th-round pick. So what is the condition on that? Okay, so I don't know what the condition on the 5th-round pick is, but if the Vikings trade, if they get the 2022 conditional 5th-round pick, so all it does is it pushes that pick back a year. So it's not that big, and the Pro Bowl voting process is not entirely like fan driven. Like if Ngakoue wins the fan vote, that only accounts for 1/3 of the vote to get into the Pro Bowl, because the players themselves vote and the coaches vote. And while I don't really love the player voting process, as you can see from the NFL Top 100, I think they care more about the voting when it comes to the Pro Bowl than they do for the Top 100. I would imagine that they're still not going to vote for a guy who doesn't have that many sacks and is not playing all that well. So it's probably not going to do anything. So you don't have to be worried. And we can all recognize that it actually is funny as hell.
What you really want to do in this particular case, if you're this fan base, is really get the players involved. Like, this clearly what you need is an uprising. You need a full-on revolution based around Yannick Ngakoue among the players. Be like, yeah, he really does deserve it. You have to spread this out. This just can't be your movement. You have to make it everybody's movement.
Right. Yeah. You gotta, it's true grassroots activism. You've got to kind of recruit activists from kind of every level of the process.
Yeah. This is how this works. Ryan,
organizing.
Yeah. Ryan asks, for James's passive aggressive corner, I recently realized that I have remade versions of meals that my girlfriend cooked 3 times in the last week. How long can I continue this trend before she realizes it? Also, follow up, does putting this in the Twitter ether amplify the passive aggression, or will it be the downfall? And aside, as an aside, her meals weren't bad. I just get particular with food and realized that after the 3rd reimagined dish, what I was doing.
Can you even realize that you were like eating the same meal but with your own twig? That's pretty interesting.
There is a level of disconnect here that is just beautiful. This is about as intended or not. This is true passive aggressive behavior.
Well, so the caveat here is how often you generally repeat meals, because if you've got a rotation of about 7 or 8 meals that you typically cook, this means nothing at all, right? It sounds like typically the meals are fairly unique, right? That you're not going to remake a meal for like maybe a month or something. And if that's the case, then that is A, probably going to get noticed somewhat quickly, and B, is definitely already passive. There's no, I think you've already crossed the threshold at that 3rd point, right? I don't think you can say it's no longer passive aggressive. So how long until she notices? Probably the next meal. I mean, if you're used to having unique dinners. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
here's
I guess
the
only thing.
I think you're right on the uniqueness being like the key here.
Yeah, like if you have pasta like 3 times a week, it just doesn't count, right? That's what you're doing. I think the most passive aggressive thing you could do is, she's going to cook, and then you get Uber Eats. Like that's borderline aggressive.
That's just mean. That's
well, yeah, but it's not like passive aggressive is nice.
Well, yeah, but there's a difference between see what he's doing, and I can sympathize, Ryan. Believe me, I can sympathize. What Ryan is doing
her
here,
food isn't bad. I just don't like it.
Yeah, that's
that's what it sounds like.
That's what that's what he is trying to say here. And is what he's doing.
Did she listen to the podcast? I assume not, right? Like you wouldn't get this question right if she did. But.
Probably not. But we have had listeners' wives and girlfriends chime in. So
yes, we have.
This is a thing. To answer your question, Ryan, first off, I applaud your level of passive aggressive here. It is truly top notch. However, it does it brings up the whole like when does she notice thing. It would have to be right around the time that something incredibly specific that she had made, very like something like fairly unique, and then you ended up just doing it. Like if you found yourself in a situation where you waited a day, waiting a day would be obvious, but like you have to
Right.
find that sweet spot of like how many days or like a week or so before you actually did it. Now, if you're just knocking them out,
and the more specific the entree, probably the more you have to wait. Like if it's like a chicken and rice dish where the chicken is cooked in a particular way, you could probably wait 2 days or something, and just make a different chicken and rice dish that is essentially the same with some tweaks that are specific to you. But if it's like a mushroom risotto, you probably have to wait a week and a half before you make it.
Yep,
Yeah.
there has to be. You have to find that sweet spot, because if you want this game to continue, and we've had people come in to the mailbag and be upset that they ruined their game. They ruined their passive aggressive game by making mention of what they were doing and how they felt like they had ruined their relationship as a result, because they no longer got the same joy out of their relationship.
They didn't get the same thrill.
Exactly. You know, there's a certain level here. So if you want to continue to do this, you are going to have to figure out the period of time that is in fact the sweet spot. So I
wish we could give better advice, but there's clearly so many contextual clues, and how much you modify the dish, right?
Yep.
If it's still very recognizable, but there's only one or two tweaks, that I think is probably where you're at in terms of like, you didn't make this right, passive aggressiveness. But if you make a lot of tweaks, you could just say it's a different dish. Like your food was so good, it reminded me of this other food that I really liked.
This is more of a play on,
right.
Yeah, that's
right. You inspired me to make this separate dish, right? But if it's like, let's go back to the mushroom risotto example. If maybe she was a little bit too quick pouring, I don't know if anyone knows how to make, I shouldn't say I don't know if anyone. So if you don't know how to make risotto, you got to take your time pouring the broth into the rice as it's cooking. And you got to wait for all the liquid to absorb before you pour more in. It's kind of a time consuming process. If you've ever watched Chopped, you know that rushing it can screw it up pretty easily. Does everybody on Chopped lose when they make risotto? I think they do.
Well, it's between that and making deconstructed versions of things. So
that and the ice cream machine. But yeah, so it's kind of a particular dish. So if you make the risotto so that it doesn't break, that would probably be super passive aggressive. Or if because if you just add a splash of lemon or something to it, you could just do that after her meal anyway, and it's fine. But like if you change kind of the mix of spices, or like, let's say, for her, when she did it, the garlic was overwhelming, so you just don't put garlic in your version at all, which I think is super passive aggressive. Or the other way around, like this needed garlic, and then you just put in way too much, whatever that means. That, I think those kind of minor tweaks can like really stick out. But if it's just like a reimagined version that uses a lot of the same concepts, then it's just like, you inspired me.
Yeah, you could totally
get
away with that.
A lot at play in this one, but I like it.
You could totally get away with that. Chris asks, if you knew for a fact that Zimmer and Spielman not only listen to the podcast, but they do so while driving, the most sacred time for podcasts, would that change the content? Would it be different if they subscribed to the Patreon at the $3.50 mark?
I mean, it sounds like they're listening to the podcast and they like it, right? So we shouldn't, in theory, change it.
No, if they're willing to pay for it, then it's obvious that this is something that they enjoy.
Yeah, the only issue is I think the knowledge that they listen would unconsciously change it, right? Like, I don't know that I would hold back on my criticism. Like, I know that, Vikings, at least the PR, read my articles, and I know that what we write does get back to Spielman and Zimmer in some respect, and ownership. I found that out too, and that really hasn't changed my writing at all. So maybe not, but it feels a little bit weird to use my voice to be like, man, Zimmer made just a huge mistake. I don't understand it. And in the back of my head, I'm just like, he's probably going to hear that. So I'd like to say it doesn't, but as humans, it's very easy to get kind of caught up in that. But I mean, they're patronizing the podcast, so clearly what we're doing is working. We're putting together a product that they like, so I don't want to screw that up for them. I don't want to become like sycophantic or anything like that. And maybe we'll influence some draft picks. Which, by the way, I went through a bunch of my mock drafts, and I nailed some Vikings picks, so I don't think I influenced it, but I could say I did.
Yeah, that certainly works. I have a feeling that if we had a Patreon, another Patreon mailbag, which we should do again next episode or something like that, that we might have more questions on like ranch-oriented things from Mike Zimmer. Like how do you,
for sure.
That
would be funny because he knows way more about how to handle that, and so he'd just be asking to see how much we'd screwed up.
Exactly, for a Reef's brush clearing corner.
Right, a Reef's horse grooming corner.
Exactly. Nick asks for a Reef's parenting corner.
God damn it.
I have a 3-year-old son. My wife and I had him sleeping through the night and in his own bed. One night, the wife let him fall asleep in our bed, and now he refuses to even sleep in his, quote, big boy bed. Any advice?
So I know James has advice for this. I know that this is something James probably has an answer to.
Bribe him with suckers.
Oh, that sounds great. I have no clue how to solve this problem. In my head, I'm just like, well, why don't you just lock the door? Which, Arif, that's a child. He's just going to bang on the door.
Yep. Best case scenario, he just falls asleep on the floor there, but he never just does.
Right. Yeah. But yeah. I'd like. So I don't know. Maybe ask him like why.
No, you're reasoning with a 3-year-old. That's a terrible decision. Don't do that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's like a bear. You can't show fear. Like don't do that.
I don't know. Does his room lock from the other side? He's a kid. I don't lock him in his room.
That's a terrible decision because you're just going to get screaming.
You have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Well, they're typically not. They're typically not. Bathroom trained at that point.
Right. They're 3. Yeah. I don't know. It's the parenting corner. I don't know what I'm talking about.
So do not engage negotiation. You're better off just with straight up bribery.
All right. Yeah. Bribe the kid.
Yep. I am a big believer in just bribing children to do things. And setting up your own spy network, which we can cover on a different episode. Don from Ohio asks, do you see the Cowboys drafting a quarterback in the first round of the draft next year or re-signing Dak?
I think they re-signed Dak.
It would be odd to see him leave the way he did and not be re-signed. But
yeah, and I do think so. Like, obviously, he got slow rolled in the negotiations, and he doesn't love that. I do think the Cowboys love him. Like, I don't think that this is like a scenario where they'll like, unless Garrett Gilbert like shows out, and then you've got like a really tough decision to make. Which, as much as I love Garrett Gilbert and Ben DiNucci, I think is pretty unlikely. I would think that's and honestly, the more likely scenario is that they stick with Dak and they let Garrett Gilbert like find his fortune elsewhere, right?
Keeping Ben DiNucci, obviously.
Well, that's inevitable, right? It's the Steve Young story. Yes. He has to find his fortune elsewhere. They'll probably hold on to his rights and trade him for like a 3rd round or maybe a 2nd round or even a 1st round pick. It's all on the cards, right? Yes. But I would think that most likely scenario where it becomes tough, they would still let, because I think Garrett Gilbert is just on a 1-year contract. So I think they would still let someone like Gilbert or Dalton. I think he's also on a 1-year contract. If Dalton like shows out, I guess, they would still let them show out. And I don't think that there's a scenario where they draft a quarterback in the 1st round. I think that they would just re-sign Dak.
I wonder if I hit my head hard enough on my desk, if I could envision a scenario where Andy Dalton becomes the starter of Dallas over Dak Prescott. Like he plays out to some absurd degree and they decide they're just going to go with the Red Rocket. Like I wonder if I would have to hit the corner or if just the edge is fine.
I think the corner is more likely to just do damage and not induce
reset
visions.
anything. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the important questions here on Norse Code.
Yeah.
Speaking of the important questions, Don asks, I know James, or Satan, has done his damnedest to ruin my life in the last several months, ruined my team in fantasy football, ruined a brisket on the new wood pellet smoker, drop a tree on me and my house, try to have me cause an accident which would have killed over 100,000 people. Now, before we get to the next...
2 episodes ago or 1 episode
That was 2
ago?
episodes ago.
Okay.
Maybe 3. I didn't say kill 100,000 people. I merely said involve 100,000 people.
Yeah, it would involve 100,000 people. Statistically, more than one would survive. That's true.
Yeah, see? Exactly. And yet, despite his best attempts, there has been a guardian angel looking over me at every turn. I was trying to think who it could have been. Perhaps it was Kyle Slaby, or Kenneth Allen, or Damian Barrett. But alas, these individuals would have wanted to see me suffer. Then it hit me like a lightning bolt. What if it had been Arif all this time? The same man I ridiculed for Seahawks fandom, the same man I constantly show his video of tumbling on the cement, the same man who I wanted to see have his left side of his body paralyzed by Mitch Trubisky. What if this man had been my guardian angel all this time? Arif, if you have been my guardian angel, how can I make it up to you? Do you wish me to spread your message on how crappy Turkey is? Would you like me to ridicule NDSU on a daily basis? How shall I repent?
I don't like, my head's big enough that I don't really need a martyr complex on top of it. So I'm going to say, I guess the guardian angel would say no too, right? But I'm going to say I'm not, but I would still appreciate it if you spread the message on how crappy Turkey is. I think that would do a great deal of societal good. So yeah, I guess that's the answer. But no, I'm not the guardian angel. That puts a lot of responsibility on me anytime anything bad happens to you. And that sounds kind of inevitable if you continue on this wood pellet smoker journey. So, or the RV journey, honestly. Did that work out? Like, I don't know if I ever saw
He
an
did
update.
post pictures on Twitter of his successful journey, despite my desire for him to cause
Your
all
attempts?
of this. Yeah, my attempts. According to him, I have nothing better to do than to ruin his life. Spoiler alert, I don't. But yeah, he did in fact make it home. All right, for those of you who are not interested in the Thanksgiving section, thank you guys so much for listening. All things are possible through Ben DiNucci. We are going to hit the Thanksgiving section hard with the first question from Kyle Slaby, who asks, for a Reef's War Room, considering we are a week away from the big day, is it too late for me to get involved with the anti-Thanksgiving movement? I want to win the war on Thanksgiving, but I don't know where to start. They must not be allowed to be thankful or enjoy pies.
I don't think it's too late. I think if you want to wage the war on Thanksgiving, I think you can be conscripted into either side. It sounds like you want to join the fight in the anti-Thanksgiving movement. So I think that you could just start tweeting. I think that would probably do a lot in the war against Thanksgiving. I think that you could get on top of it, and I think you could add some, annoying historical context or something that people don't really care about or want to listen to, about things. Like, you could do a lot, I think, but
you can't you can't make the comments too funny though. You can't make a comment about how, the spreading of disease was a big part of the first Thanksgiving, so we're just doing that again this year. You can't do that.
God.
That's too far. That is too far. But
I was talking about like getting like a direct mailing list together, but
Well, I was trying to regulate the content of his Twitter. So apparently, I might be too extreme for this movement. I might have to
pretty hard. Yeah,
I might have to.
You're a soldier in the war on Thanksgiving. Wow.
I might have to move to Cranberry Lives Matter. Fine. If that's what we're doing, then that's what we're doing. Jeremy asks, Thanksgiving side dish strategy: 2 to 3 strong contributors or everything under the sun?
It depends on how many people are going to your Thanksgiving. If you're um, a participant in the war on Thanksgiving and refusing to travel, I think you want to do the 2 and 3 strong contributors, the sides that you know are good, right? But I think that if you're
This
hosting a
is
lot of people,
Patreon
which seems
exclusive
to be
material
inadvisable
from
at the
Norse
moment, but
Code.
if that's what you're doing, I would definitely go for a breadth of sides instead of a depth. So breadth versus depth, I would pick breadth in that scenario. Yeah, it really kind of just depends on the size of your audience and how well you know the audience. I tend to do 4 to 5 sides when I'm doing kind of a big Thanksgiving. And I invest a lot of time into all of it. Obviously, it's Thanksgiving. It's the best cooking holiday of the year. But I think this year it's going to be 2 to 3 sides. Probably not anything unique this year. Probably not going to stretch myself too much. But yeah, and you heard kind of my Thanksgiving plans in the interview. We're going to be dropping off a little bit of food at a couple of people's houses on their doorstep, and then come back and hopefully people will drop off food at our doorstep, and then that's how we're going to be sharing. But yeah, I think that for this year's Thanksgiving, for most people, the best bet would be the 2 to 3 strong contributors. Make sure you've got that starch that that you love. So for me, that would be mashed potatoes. For a lot of people, that might be dinner rolls or stuffing, which I'm probably going to get stuffing anyway. And then making sure I've got a great vegetable side. Chelsea does the killer glazed carrots that I love, so we're probably going to do that. And then a third side might be something that is a little bit unique or something that we haven't done that year yet. And I don't consider the dessert pies to be sides, so that's separate.
Everyone this year should really hone in. A lot of time has been spent in 2020 baking bread and attempting to get through this whole thing. Really, I feel like what people should do is really hone in on that, one or two like really, really good thing that you do or you make for Thanksgiving. Just really hone in on it, and maybe like one other thing that you like maybe haven't tried, and try to incorporate that or really work hard on it. But I can't envision a scenario where you have everything under the sun this year. That just seems a bit too much. Really, just hone in. You're likely cooking for less people than you're used to. Your fridge is going to end up being full of all this stuff, and you're going to sit there afterwards like, I am overly exhausted.
And some of these sides do not freeze well either.
They do not. So really, really hone in on what you've got there. Logan asks, I'm making a chicken this year since it's just my wife and I. How should I cook it? What are the seasonings?
Yeah, so I think that a good balance between a Thanksgiving style presentation, which is always just fun, and just fundamentally good chicken, would be kind of the more modern method of spatchcocking chicken, which is to cut out the spine and flatten it out, and then tuck the wings in and roast that, which leads to a much more even cooking process than if you cook the bird without flattening or anything like that. And there's a whole thing about it. It's become a trend for the past, I want to say 7 or 8 years, to do that a little bit more often. We'll link that in the show notes it's also called a butterfly chicken. And that is going to get you, I think, a really amazing looking bird. It's going to look great when you carve it for your one guest. And you get kind of the crispiness that you get from roasting. You get the flavor, and it's really great for maintaining moisture and stuff like that, especially if you do the dry brine beforehand and you do some of the other tricks like a little bit of baking powder to increase the acidity on the surface and increase or not acidity, the opposite of that, basicness, I guess.
Yeah, you're just trying to kind of change the overall when the Maillard reaction actually occurs.
Yeah, exactly. And that improves the browning process too. So for me, I wouldn't go too far afield. I think things like thyme and rosemary are fantastic on chicken. If you're a oregano person, I would put that on. We typically avoid that a little bit. Parsley is good. But yeah, I wouldn't go too far. If you wanted to go in a different direction, I love like a lot of paprika on chicken. If you wanted to go in that direction, that's really good, especially with butter and a little bit of spice. We just made paprikash the other day I love it. Paprika and chicken is just such a winning combination. And for that, I would also add garlic powder. Probably do that either way, but it's really good with garlic, onion, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's probably what I would do. And again, I'm going to link that recipe in the show notes. And they've got a bunch of small tricks. Like they increase the number of glutamates by including just a little bit of soy sauce, which you're not going to taste. You're gonna get that umami flavor, right? It's going to make it feel a little bit more savory and meaty. So that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'm going to include that in the show notes. I think the spatchcocking is the way to go for that presentation. Otherwise, the chicken that I usually make, if you're not going to go with presentation, is just I do like a version of Alton Brown's chicken and 40 cloves, which the cloves in this case refer to garlic and not clove. But instead of a whole chicken like he uses and breaks down, I only use chicken thighs because they're the most forgiving meat that you can cook.
You know, the only thing I would add to the spatchcocking would be potentially putting it on the on the roasting plate underneath a number of like vegetables, like root vegetables or whatever. So something you could theoretically, carrots and stuff like that too. Something the sort of thing you would potentially do with a turkey as well if you wanted to prepare it like that. And you've got a little bit of time before Thanksgiving. Maybe go out and get the little like white booties or whatever that you can toss on the feet for presentation, or on the legs for presentation. Just do it up a little bit. You're getting chicken this year. Might as well. Let's go with Duke Bangkok, who asks, "What are your Mount Rushmore of Thanksgiving dishes?"
Oh man, that's tough. So I think one of them is definitely mashed potatoes. I can't go without it. I think it's basic as hell, but it's just so good. So I'm definitely doing that. I'm a huge pumpkin pie guy. Most people don't seem to be. So I understand that, but I think I might put pumpkin pie there. The meat spot on my my Mount Rushmore. I'm going to go with the best Thanksgiving meat I've ever had, which was a crown roast with it was like a crown roast of lamb. That was really phenomenal. It's not obviously a traditional Thanksgiving thing, but if I'm going to go with something I've cooked often on Thanksgiving, it would be ham. But I think I'm going to go with the crown roast of lamb. And then the fourth one, God, probably want to go with like a vegetable of some sort. I'm seeing you type out your thing, and you typed out smoked, which was really funny.
I mean, guilty.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what because I love stuffing. I don't know if it's going to go there. I love the Brussels sprouts. I don't know if it's going to go there. Oh, actually, it's not even going to be a vegetable. It's going to be butternut squash soup.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's my fourth.
I hadn't thought of putting a soup in there. Well, if I'm going to be looking at mine, I would likely be starting off with stuffing. It's curious. I don't actually have a real meat on mine. I have stuffing. I'd go with sweet potato. I don't like it when there's a bunch of marshmallow and chocolate stuff on it. I do just like a nice.
That's fair. I think most people don't. I think they just did it for a while because of inertia.
Yeah. Green bean casserole ends up on mine. And I was trying to decide if it was going to be a dessert or if it was going to be kind of something random, because for whatever reason, my family ends up doing a bunch of like Brussels sprouts with like bacon in it. But I think that's more of a recent thing for the family. And while I do enjoy it, and I really like Brussels sprouts, I don't think it really counts. A recent addition to our Thanksgiving stuff has been apple brown Betty as a dessert instead of like an apple pie.
That is elite. I'm going to include a recipe, unless you have a recipe you specifically want to include.
Peggy Hill's apple brown Betty from Binging with Babish,
right?
Yep, yeah. That was the one where she used it to. She didn't actually try to kill Randy Travis with it, but that was the plot of the episode. But that's the one that we've been doing the last couple of years that I kind of ask for every year. So that's my thought on that. Luke Braun asks, what is the ideal Thanksgiving entree? If we've rejected turkey, what should be the number one go-to?
So for this,
he is choosing beef Wellington.
No, someone responded with beef Wellington.
Oh,
he wasn't the one that chose it. And it is difficult for me to disagree. That is really phenomenal. For me, I think the ideal Thanksgiving entree should be one that isn't so like, for example, I don't think the crown roast would go here, right? I don't think it should be so expensive that you can't consistently do it on Thanksgiving. Now, of course, beef Wellington does, you use a Chateaubriand, which is not necessarily a cheap cut of meat, but I think it's a little bit easier. But I think it should be a little bit difficult because it's kind of special, so it's kind of difficult to do. But it should not be so difficult that some Thanksgivings it works and some Thanksgiving it doesn't work. And so the beef Wellington I would usually put off the list, but there's a YouTube video from French guy cooking, Alex, that does probably the most foolproof way you could do it, and it starts with like sous vide, right, which is probably the easiest way to do it. But it is nearly foolproof. It's a really remarkable. I haven't made it yet, but I've had really good beef Wellington, and man, is it just an incredible dish. So I'll sort of co-sign that, and then I would add two additional entrees to that. Both of them are from Serious Eats. Both of them we've made. The first one is a slow roasted boneless leg of lamb. I think most slow roasting is relatively easy. Kind of depends on where you are. Leg of lamb can be pretty expensive, but I think that this is pretty good. It is difficult to kind of get around to doing it just because people don't cook lamb all that often, so it's going to be kind of rare. But I think that this would be a good time to kind of bust it out. I think it's really good. And then once I've made roast goose, I'm going to include that. I've talked about it, I think, on a previous Christmas episode, I want to say. If not, I think I talked about it on a Thanksgiving episode. But roast goose is awesome. It's incredible. And there's a whole story in this Serious Eats link about how the first time they tried to make roast goose, it was just an absolute disaster, and they didn't really know how to do it. And if you do it like in the easier way, in a way that doesn't like take like 48 hours and stuff like that, and plucking each individual thing and then ending up with like a greasy mess, it can actually be really incredible. And we did that, and it is something I would highly recommend. So that's another thing that you're only really going to have like once or twice a year. You kind of want to go out of your way to make it. And I think this is also one where like it's regionally, much more expensive in some places than others. But yeah, it's something that you can't always go to. You're not always going to go to, but you're going to remember that Thanksgiving. It's going to be kind of special. So I think that's it fits that criteria.
Well, I'm going to ruin everything here before I do. For me, every year around Thanksgiving, I end up watching 2, maybe 3 of the following videos. I might find a way to remember, oh, hey, I should listen to Alice's Restaurant by Woody Guthrie. Mm-hmm. I may find myself watching the video of WKRP in Cincinnati where they do the turkey drop.
Right. Yeah.
And as God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly. There's that one. And the third one is less well known, but something I enjoy thoroughly. And if you are a fan of people who are passive aggressive, let me tell you what. There is a clip of Johnny Carson talking to Doc Severinsen, his band leader, about Thanksgiving. They're just having an off the cuff conversation where Johnny forgets that Doc Severinsen is divorced. And it's like, I used to, and they just kind of laugh about it and talk about how they don't really care for turkey all that much. People in the Midwest in the 40s and 50s would grow their chicken as a pet and then have to kill them on Thanksgiving, and how terrible that made Johnny feel and everything. But at some point, Doc Severinsen says that what he likes for Thanksgiving is instead of like turkey stuff is lasagna. And I thought that was such a weird thing.
What?
He's very Italian and doesn't like turkey at all. He just wants a nice lasagna for Thanksgiving. And the more I think about it, one year I think I'm just going to up and do that. is just try that instead of turkey. Like, just really work at that, and then just like, and not surprise guests or something. You're like, I know you guys showed up for turkey, we're having lasagna or something, but like doing that instead. I imagine that'll be the one where that'll be the year that after my wife divorces me or something. Like, okay, well, it's me alone here. I did one too many passive aggressive things, and this is how I ended up. I'm going to have you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have lasagna for Christmas, or lasagna for Thanksgiving rather. So I just thought that was such a bizarre thing. It's like, that's actually kind of interesting. I don't know if you could necessarily make that in a way that could be Thanksgiving-y, but I'd be willing to try that, because that just seems just about as odd as you could possibly do. And that's me ruining the show, and that's how we are going to end this episode. For those interested, the link to that conversation will be listed in the show notes. So that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, where can they find your work?
Yeah, you can find it at theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. I have been on a ton of podcasts this week. I'll probably try to link them in the show notes. But yeah, there's not a ton coming out in terms of pregame content from me, except I've got a piece on Justin Jefferson and how good he can be, who he compares to, what his ceiling is. I talked to a couple of people about this. So that's going to be going up probably by the time you've heard this. I've already submitted it, so it's not even a situation where I'm like, no, it's definitely coming out tomorrow, and then I work on it and I can't get it done. It's done, so it should be out by the time you all are listening to this.
All right, so that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys enjoy it. Again, the bonus episode for Patreon people should be available right now as well. If you are interested in that, you can go to paypal.me/norsecode or patreon.com/norsecode as well. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that all things are possible through Ben DiNucci. And we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/norsecode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/norsecode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.